This meeting is being recorded. So welcome to everyone, and those of you who may be watching it recorded. Just know that your fourth grade state team is here for you, and we are super excited to share our experiences and our journey through the PLC process. So my name is Mandy Barrett. I am the principal at Gravette Upper Elementary, of course in Gravette, Arkansas, very northwest corner. And I also am an associate with Solution Tree, so I get to do this work with many schools across the United States and in Arkansas. I love the work. I've seen so many wonderful things happening for students because of the work. So we're excited to share with you our experiences. So I'm going to turn it over and let everyone else introduce themselves, and then we'll go ahead and get started for the day.
Welcome everyone. My name is Dusty Larson, and I am a fourth grade teacher at Gravette Upper Elementary. And I'm excited to share my information with you today. And if you do have any questions or anything, please feel free to reach out.
Hi everyone, my name is Mary Ramirez and I teach in Spradling Elementary in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Hello, I'm Rosanna Brown and I teach at Ballman Elementary in Fort Smith. I teach fourth grade. I'm really excited today to share with you any information that you may be interested in.
All right, that is your fourth grade team that has been working together on creating this presentation, as well as several months of us getting to know each other and coming together as a professional learning community ourselves. So we are super, super excited. Please know that when we're finished today, that we are not finished. Just as the PLC process is a never-ending cycle, we want to be here for you also. So if you see things that stick out to you as, wait a second, I've got some more questions on that, or I need a little bit more information, or maybe our team needs to speak with someone, this is what this is for. You have 4 people on this team who you can email, we can jump on a Zoom. We're excited just to be able to support all of our Arkansas schools because they're our kids and we want to take that mutual accountability for them. So we are going to get started. I'm going to share my screen and we'll start working through some pieces today. We've got quite a bit to share with you. So I'm going to share my screen real quick and we'll get started. All right. Rosanna, can you give me a thumbs up? Are you seeing my PLC overview screen? No. Okay. There it is. There it is? Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you for that. So we are going to be sharing with you a PLC overview. We tried not to get too in-depth on too much because it is so much. But again, you find those areas that you want more information and you feel free to reach out to us and we will go more in-depth with you. So we're going to get started right away. Whoops, you met us. These are this is our information about who's on the team, and you will be able to reach out to us at any point. This is the agenda, and yes, there's quite a bit that we will be discussing today. All of the big rocks of the PLC process. So we're going to start off this morning with Guiding Coalition. The Guiding Coalition, you all may have called that your building leadership team. These are the people who are helping to make decisions within the school. Yes, I am Gravette Upper Elementary's principal, but my people are the ones who are making those decisions. They are the ones who come together and share their thoughts, share their ideas, look over data, trying to make things happen for our school in the very best way. So let's talk about why. Why do we need it? Who should we have on it? How do you even get started? And then what's the work once you do have them? We're not just going to sit around and look at each other and twiddle our thumbs. We have work to be done. So we're going to talk about each of those 4 areas because ultimately the PLC process and implementing and being a professional learning community is simply because not one person has all of the knowledge and expertise to make things happen in your school. If you think about all of the knowledge and all of the information and experiences that your teams have, that every teacher in your school has, we know that we can do better and we can do more when we come together as a community to make those decisions. So no one person will have the energy, right? Especially what we've just experienced. We know that our energy level, we can't do it alone. The expertise, the influence to lead complex change processes, it has to be in our culture. It is who we are. And once you become a professional learning community, that's the premise that you have to think about. It's who we are. It's not a time, it's not a day. It's how we do business in our school. And that takes key staff members who are willing to jump in and make things happen for your school. So here's the why behind it. Transforming the organization with cultural change and a mindset shift. Now, this is important because this is a culture. This isn't, again, it's not just a time. It's not every Friday at 2:30, that's PLC time. No, that's collaboration time with your PLC members. It takes a mindset shift that you are no longer a silo. You are not alone. You are not by yourself. And thank goodness we don't have to do the work by ourselves anymore. You don't go in your classroom and you're not a silo any longer. You get to collaborate and make decisions together. The Guiding Coalition will take the responsibility for the staff's learning and implementation. So that's a big carry on your shoulders when you become a Guiding Coalition member, that you're helping your staff members, your colleagues, your peers learn and implement the PLC process. And it helps to guarantee the sustainability of the process. When you have the people on the team that's doing the work, they take that ownership and it becomes our school, not my classroom any longer, our school. Who should we have on our Guiding Coalition or our building leadership team? Who should those people be? We know Jim Collins' quote of get the right people on the bus. You've got to make sure you have the people who believe in it, who have seen it, who have felt it, tasted it, worked it, have done all of those pieces. Some of the key people, lead teachers, counselor, one representative from your specialty classes. Don't forget art, music, and PE. They get to see the students in a different light. We need their information. We need to know, what does your music teacher see? What does your art teacher see in that particular student? When we're talking student by student, those specialty teachers have a different viewpoint. So don't forget to include a specialty teacher on your team. Interventionists, curriculum coaches, and guys, I can't stress to you enough, your special education teacher. We had a couple of years ago, where our special education teachers were being pulled into another collaboration time during our scheduled building collaboration time, which meant that they weren't at the table. And we can't have that. Our special education teachers are so valuable and so full of knowledge. And sometimes they get squelched, they get pushed to the side. The timing and the schedule causes them not to be able to be at the table. We need them. We need all of these people coming together with their shared knowledge and expertise to make great things happen. So we've talked about the why, that's the who. Now, how in the world do we do this? First of all, you need to define the role. Your principal, the Guiding Coalition team members, even get feedback. What would the role of your Guiding Coalition team members be? Be clear who's on the team. Let your entire staff know who your Guiding Coalition team members are and what the role of those members will be. Communicate the purpose of the Guiding Coalition with the school. Again, we have to open up and be very transparent as to our Guiding Coalition role, their expectations, and who's on the team. Stay focused on the right work. Again, they're change agents. This is how things happen in our school. And I'll share some stories with you when we get more into the RTI process, because I didn't do it, my team did, because they're the change agents, the teachers at the table with their ideas, with what works with the schedule, who are in the trenches daily. They're the ones making it happen. We also need to be careful that our Guiding Coalition team members are not just the messengers. If things are not working at a particular grade level, that's fine, and we need to talk about that. But they're not just the messengers to your Guiding Coalition, and they're not just the messengers back from the Guiding Coalition either. Yes, they're going to have those conversations, but they've got work to be done. Then you just need to start. It's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to be different, but you've just got to take the leap. And let those Guiding Coalition team members come together, build that team together, make sure that you have a team building activity and have that ongoing, because the trust has to be there also. And if you look back and we look at who's on the team, these people normally don't get to be together working, right? Because normally it would be your fourth grade team members, and that's a professional learning community. But the Guiding Coalition is much bigger than that. We've spanned out now, so we must include teachers who normally don't get the opportunity to be together and to have those conversations. So it is very important that we just take the leap, we jump in, because these are the people that are going to help implement and help make the change into a professional learning community. So what do they do? What does the Guiding Coalition even do? Why do we even need them? We need them. It's big. First of all, they have to be able to meet consistently. This past year, of course, was very difficult to make that happen in our particular building because, you know, all of the guidelines and the safety pieces. But we have to make sure that we schedule our Guiding Coalition to meet consistently. They're the ones who are driving the mission and vision. We're going to talk about mission and vision next. They're the ones who are making sure that when decisions are made at grade levels, that we are continuing to focus on what our mission and our vision for our school is. Give all staff a voice. They do go back and they do talk with their teams, and they do come back and talk with the bigger team. So we want the staff to feel empowered, that they are being listened to. Accountability to the process, making sure that when their grade level or their content teams are together, that the process is being followed. You're going to have naysayers. You're going to have those people who aren't quite bought into the process yet. But as they continue to grow through the process, I guarantee they will be right there with everyone else. And I've got stories. I've got lots of stories to share about my own experiences with my own staff. You know, those people who are the jumper inners. Let's do this. We've got this. This is what's best for kids. And those that are held back a little bit, but eventually come to my office door and say, I get it. I get why we're doing this now. The Guiding Coalition sets school-wide SMART goals. They review data to compare to those goals, review those assessments and proficiency levels, unit content expectations, and then those CFAs and CSAs, and we're going to talk about the importance of those throughout our day together as well. So that's the work of the Guiding Coalition, the how, the why, the what, and who. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do my job as the way that we have it happening in our school without those leaders being on that team. So don't forget the importance of your Guiding Coalition, getting that created in your school, and making sure that we know who's on the team, what their roles are, and what the work is. Because again, we're not just sitting around looking at each other and saying we're doing this work. We are in it and we are doing the work. So I'm going to turn it over now to Dusty. She's going to talk about the mission, vision, values, and why that is so important as well. Let me get muted.
All right. So Mandy talked about the Guiding Coalition and how do you put that together and what is their purpose? And so once you have identified who's going to be on your Guiding Coalition, you have that team, representatives of everyone. Your next step is you need to think about those mission, vision, collective commitments, and your goals. And we'll kind of talk about your goals in another section. So we're just going to start with that beginning point. You have to have your mission, vision, and collective commitments before you start, where you don't know what your focus is and what you're going to be doing. So if you take a look at this picture, okay, and I want you to think about, can you click it?
Oh, sure.
Hold on. Okay. I want you to look at this picture and think about what's going on in this house. I mean, I wouldn't want to go into a house that looks like this. What, you know, why is it leaning? Why is it tilting? So hopefully you looked at that and said, oh, there's something wrong with the foundation. You know, if we don't have a good foundation, our school can't build upon that. And so how do we purposely design a school that is built or set on that sturdy foundation? Well, you have to have those mission, vision, and goals. Okay. So your mission, it's your why. Why do we exist? Okay. What is our fundamental purpose? We need to make sure that it's clarified, that we have our priorities, that we sharpen our focus. Okay. Don't just write a paragraph of, you know, we want all students to learn at high standards. Okay. Specific bullet point. This is exactly why we exist. This is what our reason is. Okay. From there, you need to build your vision. Okay. So now we know why we exist. We have our mission. We have our purpose. How are we going to get to that purpose? Okay. So what is our school must become to accomplish that purpose? How are we going to get there? What is going to give us our direction? So for example, a vision can be very short. The vision in our school is united, we lead, learn, and succeed. Okay. And underneath all of those, united, we lead, we can talk about how are we going to lead. United, you know, we learn. What are we going to do to make sure that learning is there? Okay. Now that's just united, we learn, lead, succeed, our vision, but know that each one of those parts has additional information to help us understand exactly what we're doing. Okay. So you have your mission, you have your why, you have your vision of what. Okay. Now, how are you going to do that? What are your values? Okay. So we know why we exist. We know how we have to get there, you know, where we want to get to, what's going to happen in our school. What are our values? How are we going to behave? How are we going to teach to achieve our mission? Okay. These are called our collective commitments. Okay, they guide our teaching, they guide our behaviors, they guide how we lead ourselves throughout the school to teach our students to become leaders as well. Okay, so they all fit together. And then last, once you have that, you're going to go to your goals. Okay, how we know that we're going to make our progress? You know, what is our goal? Where is our endpoint we want to get to? What's the timeline that we're going to do it by? What's those specific targets we're going to do to get there? And then what are our priorities? Okay, so like I said, later in the presentation, we'll kind of get to the goals and how you set those goals. We're just going to kind of focus real quick here about our mission and our vision. Okay, so there is on Global PD, and it is a free piece of the Global PD under free resources. There is some documents from Shifting from Me to We. And it will help you with your mission and vision. Okay. So mission and vision in 45 minutes. Okay. So this could be done at the beginning of the year, you know, in your staff meeting, talk about difference. If you have to come back and revisit it, that's okay. Okay. So you want to get everybody there. You want to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay. We have to establish the target. We have to make sure where are we going? Okay. And then with that, what are we going to do? So there are different steps that you can go through. And, you know, you might start with something bigger and then you might work it down. I know when we worked on this and we were looking at our mission and vision, we kind of divided up into groups. Could be grade level teams. It could be cross-curricular, completely up to you how you want to do it. And we, on our own chart piece of chart paper, decided, okay, what do we feel why we exist? Okay. And every group talked about it. Everybody, you know, put it down. And then we came back together. We looked at all of the group's pieces and we found what was common between each group of why do we exist? Okay. From that, that's where we then took and we built our mission. So we kind of put everybody's together. We talked about it. We came up with our mission. Okay. Once we had our mission, then we looked at it and said, okay, break back up into your groups. Now taking that mission statement that we've created, go back and now write, what do you feel the vision of our school is? Okay, what is it that we must become in order to accomplish what that mission is? Okay, again, come back together, look at your visions. What are some common pieces between them? Okay, put them together, create your vision. Again, it could be something as short as united we learn, lead, and succeed. Okay, keep it simple, keep it manageable, keep it achievable. Okay, and then once you have your mission and vision, you can go in there and look, okay, now what of our collective commitments? Are we, always going to use a guaranteed and viable curriculum? Are we, going to be here every day on time so that we're here for our students? What does the staff need to do to make sure, this is a non-negotiable, we're going to do this, we're going to make sure that we are achieving this mission and vision with our students. Okay, so those are your collective, and that again could just be a bullet point of lists of what your staff is going to do, what everyone's going to do. These are non-negotiables. Everyone has to do it. They are things that cannot be, well, I don't quite like that one, so I'm going to do this one. Nope, you've got to be in there and you've got to know this is our school, this is what we believe in, this is what we're going to achieve, and we can only achieve that if we are unified and work together on that. Okay, so again, don't forget there's that PD resource. It'll walk you through the steps. It'll give you examples of how you can do it and how to work together with your staff to do that as well.
All right, so thank you, Dusty. That was fantastic and so important, guys. Your guiding coalition, your mission, vision, values, collective commitments, all of those coming together just to continue to strengthen the culture in your building. When we are all focused on the same target, we can hit it. Just like we tell our students, if we can give them exactly what they're headed for, then they're unstoppable. Just like our staff, completely unstoppable when we have the same goals in mind and that same target to hit. So I'm going to share with you some surveys that you can do with your teams just to get an idea of where are we in this process. Probably a lot of you have had training with Solution Tree. Maybe you've attended an institute or had an associate in. And you probably have teams at different levels, even within our own building. We're a 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade building, and we have teams at different levels of implementation. And we're a model PLC school. So that tells you guys, this is a continual process, a continual cycle. You have new people coming in, and that always kind of not rocks the boat, but you understand where I'm headed with that. Like, you've got to bring those new people on as well. So some of these surveys, I've got 3 listed here, but there are so many more additional resources on that Global PD free resources. So I am going to show you those just a second here and let you see that, again, these are free resources on Global PD, so you can pull these up for your team at any point. So here's our first one. Let me get it pulled up for you. State of Our Learning Team Survey is what this one is called. And while that's pulling up, I will tell you that one of my favorite resources now is the Big Book of Tools by Bill Ferreter. If you don't have this, I would highly, highly recommend it. It is just exactly what it says, Big Book of Tools, lots of protocols that you and your teams can work through. This one actually is out of Making Teamwork Meaningful. And again, you can see it just gives the opportunity for your teams to have a voice. That's what we want to assure these teachers is we're not coming in and telling you, you must do everything the exact same way. We are telling you there are tight and loose aspects of the PLC process. So when you are talking through the changes that are going to happen, we need that feedback from the teachers. And you can see some personal dynamics name of the learning team, that gives me feedback as well. Our learning team has agendas developed, a process for gathering input from all of their members, defined roles, sharing the workload. They need to know that we're looking at the pieces that are so important. And as I told you as we got started this morning, we're not going to go in depth with every single detail of how to become the very best professional learning community that you can be. But you can see based on this survey, there are a lot of pieces. For example, we need to talk about agendas. We need to talk about trust and how we're taking care of conflicts that are happening. You can see collaboration development. There's just a lot to being able to get that feedback from the teachers. So you don't have to create it. It is there for you, which makes it even better. Okay, the next one is a collaborative team rubric. And this one is just set up a little bit differently, where they just have to circle where they think they are. The norms, data usage. This is really great feedback to get from the team members because there's going to be different perspectives. Some team members will feel like their team is very data driven and that all the decisions that they make come from data. And then some of those team members from the exact same team may see it differently. And so it is very important that based upon the results of these surveys, that we are making things happen for those teams. Instructional strategies. Are they even discussing instructional strategies during their collaboration time? Or are they just looking at data saying, oh, well, we've got this many who are doing this. Okay, well, let's intervene on those. There's a lot more. There's many discussions that need to be happening at your collaboration time. And the last one that I'm going to share with you, this one, if you've been to an institute or you've had some training from Solution Tree, this critical issues for team consideration has been around for a very long time. And it is vital. It is truly vital to your teams to get their feedback and make decisions based upon that. I will tell you, one of the first institutes that I had attended, Mike Manos brought this up, and he said, you can only have a 1, a 5, or a 10. You cannot have anything else 2, 3, 4, because that's what we generally try to do, right? As educators, we try to, well, it's really hard for me to give myself a 10 because we're really hard on ourselves and don't generally go that direction. So I'm going to give myself a 7. Well, what's a 7? And so it is very important that either we're doing it or we're not. Maybe we have a few little aspects which would give us kind of a 5 that we need to change up, but making sure that we are either not true to our team, we haven't started that, or it's not a part of who we are. Maybe we're working on it, we're addressing it. That's the 5. That's not a 6, it's not a 7, it's a 5. And then it's true of our team. So we can go, yes, we've got that. We've got 10 on that one. And so you can see those big pieces, the important parts of working together as a professional learning community. Team norms and protocols, analyzing student data, clear on the knowledge and skills that the students have to acquire, that question 1, right? Align the essential learning with the state standards. I'll just talk through just a couple of things. Results of common assessments. We're really going to talk about, you know, Becky before talked about how common assessments were the linchpin of making the PLC process work in your schools. And so we're going to really hit that after we get into some other things this afternoon. So looking at the results, agree on criteria, taught the criteria, proficiency standards. So you can see that we want our teams to be able to give us feedback. And again, just as we were talking about the Guiding Coalition, this is some of that work. Pull these surveys in, give the Guiding Coalition an opportunity to see what their team members and other team members around the school are seeing. We had some time right after school was out where I brought in the content areas, and it was some of the best collaboration time because it gave the 5th grade team the opportunity to hear how the 3rd grade team is working. It gave the 4th grade team the opportunity to hear what they needed to make sure that 5th grade, those students were ready and were successful. Having that vertical collaboration, and again, your guiding coalition will have that vertical along with those specialty areas too. So getting these surveys completed, even if you just do one of them, and have the guiding coalition look over that data, it really helps to drive to make sure, are we pushing forward towards the mission and the vision that we have for our school? So making sure those surveys are being done and looked at. Remember, we don't just do surveys and then put them to the side to say we did a survey. We want to look at them, we want to analyze them, and we want to make decisions as we continue to move forward. All right, so that brings us to, we're right on time. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take a 15-minute break at this point. So get yourself some water, get yourself a little snacky snack, and we will come back together. Let me check my time here. So we have 9:02. So let's come back at 9:20. Okay, we'll come back at 9:20 and we're going to start on SMART goals right after we get back from our break time. So 9:20, we'll see you all back here. And then Miss Rosanna is going to start us back off with SMART goals. All right, and don't forget, use the chat. If you have questions along the way, please use the chat so that we can stop and make sure that we are jumping in if there's anything that we can offer you in that chat time. One of the 4 of us will be watching and monitoring that chat box, and we can answer questions along the way so you don't forget what you might have asked. So Matthew, you asked the question, will this presentation be shared? Yes, this presentation will be shared. And we honestly, we want to provide you everything and anything that we can to support your school through the PLC process. So thank you for that question. And don't hesitate again to use that chat box to ask those questions. So I'm going to jump off. We'll see you back here at 9:20. God. All right, I think we'll bring everybody back together. We've got just a little less than a minute. And let me check my chat box here. And again, don't forget we can, oh, where can you get a copy of the surveys? Allison, those are on Global PD, but we can also put a live link to those for you. And that way you can have them in an easier way. So I'll make sure to add those in before the end of the day today, that I get those live links in there. Thank you for that question. Don't forget to use the chat box if you have questions or want something from us. Please, we will provide whatever it is that we can to you. All right, so we are going to turn it over now to Miss Rosanna, and she's going to share with you about SMART goals and the importance and the impact of having those SMART goals. So I'm going to unmute, or mute rather, and turn it over to you, Miss Rosanna.
Thank you, Mandy. Okay, so today I am going to talk just a little bit about SMART goals. So if you'll advance that slide for me. Okay, so your SMART goals. SMART goals is an acronym, and it stands for strategic and specific. I know this one just says specific, but strategic because your goal should relate to the identification of the long-term or overall goal of your school and your district, and it should also relate to the way you achieve your goals. So strategic and specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Go forward, please. And so the power of SMART goals. These are some quotes from Solution Tree about the power of SMART goals. They have a whole page of these, and they're very motivating when you read them. But also just by setting a goal, oftentimes that is a great motivator.
Pardon me, Roseanne.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any other tabs open that could be closed? It appears that you're having bandwidth issues with your audio. If you can close out anything else that might help clear up the issue.
Okay. Close this out. Does that help?
Lindsay is also.
Yeah, try talking. No, it sounds like you're in a warped, I don't know, Darth Vader type environment.
Yeah, Lindsay's also suggesting to call in to the Zoom. That might be a different path to clear up the audio. The numbers are in the chat.
Use the cell phone to dial in.
Yeah, that could possibly fix it. Mandy, you may know more than I do. Do you know of anything else to try?
I don't. I think the calling in would probably be the easiest. Maybe mute and then call in on your cell phone.
Okay.
Is this any better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much.
That is better?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that. I think it was on it wasn't on the system. It was on Realtek Audio.
No, you sound like a teacher now, not like you belong in a Star Wars movie.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Oh, you're good. Thank you.
Thank you for helping me clear that up. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. So did you want me to start over?
Yeah, I think maybe go over the SMART again.
Okay. All right. So the SMART is actually an acronym, and it is an acronym. The S is for strategic and specific. And strategic because your goals should relate to the identification of your long-term or overall goal for your district and your school. And it also should include the means of achieving the goal. So that's why strategic is added into that. The M is for measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. So if you can go ahead and advance to the next slide. So on Solution Tree, they have a whole slew of quotes about the power of SMART goals. But I think the big takeaway for me is that SMART goals energize people. They motivate, they make you motivated. They lead you to challenging yourself and others. And so they need to be very specific so that you can reach those goals. Otherwise, you lose out on that motivation. So if you can go ahead and advance. So it also leads to the greater achievement in your classrooms. So when you set your SMART goal, it can be helpful to use the template provided by Solution Tree, which I put a link in the chat. So I think that if you want to look at that, you can. Things to consider when you're writing your SMART goal. You should always consider your district's goals first. And usually they're pretty broad. So they're fairly easy to incorporate. Then your school goal may be slightly more specific, like you may have a specific area that your principal or school leader wants you to improve on. And it should be it's learning for all students in the school. They want to see an improvement in that area for all. And usually those are based kind of off of our state testing, or they may be off your interim exams, things like that. So if you'll go ahead and advance. Pardon me? Oh, okay. So then when you're setting your SMART goal for your team, you should be very specific. And so I put an example in here. You put your current reality. What is your current reality? You can get your, normally the team goal is an overarching goal for the entire year. So by the end of the year, you want to reach this, and you're going to take the little baby steps along the way to get there. And so their current reality is last year, 85% of our students met or exceeded the target score of a 3 on our state's writing prompt in May. And this is a made up goal, so don't be thinking it's my school. Okay, so then that's your current reality. So the SMART goal may be that you want, since you had 85%, you may want to reach 90% of the students will meet or exceed a target score of 3. But don't forget the remaining 10. Oftentimes we forget to include the remainder of our students. And even though they may not reach proficiency, they should show improvement. So you always want to include 100% of your students in some way. Maybe they're going to reach the first level of your proficiency that we'll talk about later. One of the other, I think Mareri is going to talk about your proficiency charts, but you want them to show improvement, 100% of the students. So you want to put that in your SMART goal. You do not want to leave them out. So it's very important. If you'll go ahead and advance that slide real quickly. So after you set your team goal, you want to make sure you address all of the following. And on that form that I put a link for, it has a place to address each one of these. So this is to help you stay accountable and stay on track and not get sidetracked or bogged down in a small detail. I know for me, it's really hard for me to let go of some of those little details, and they hang me up because that detail may not really be all that important in your overall goal. So keep your goal in mind the entire time that you're teaching and you're working towards this goal. So the first thing you want to write out, you want to know all the strategies, action steps, all of the things, the activities in your classroom that you want to do to make sure that you are trying to reach your goal. And sometimes when those are really well planned and executed, they really make a big difference. Don't forget in those action steps to always include your timely feedback. I put that there. Assessments and the feedback are vital. If the kids have that timely feedback, you're going to see growth. And there's a column for who is responsible. And so you want to write down all of the people who are responsible for helping you reach that goal. For example, I may, of course, I'm going to be responsible. I may teach a small group with that student in it, but I also will hold my interventionist responsible to help me reach that goal. If I'm having some skill versus will groups, you know, they have the skill, but not the will, I may ask the principal to step in and help me with that, because I can't reach the academic goal until I get that will under control. So on the timeline, you're going to make sure you want to make notes of when you're going to have your steps completed. And when I talk about units, you will see the timeline I put in my units. I'm going to share those with you. And then you will also have those checkpoints you may use. We use iStation data, we use star reading data, we even do the DRAs for our low students who, and I know I should not have used that term, for our babies who are struggling and need to be on level, we use a DRA. And so then we also use things such as the ACT Aspire interim. Some of you use MAP interims and your summative assessments. So we all take, I think, the ACT Aspire in the state of Arkansas. If you are doing some kind of SMART goal for your team, and you could set some team goals, like for us, we have a vertical alignment. We vertically aligned at the end of the year to teach context clues because it was a obvious weakness on our last interim. And we decided we wanted to get that in the last quarter. So what we did was, as vertical team, we approached it with the same teaching style, the same vocabulary, everything we would want. But we also had some PD sessions on how to teach. So we included the PD sessions and when we were going to have those completed by, when we were going to share our knowledge with our teammates. All of that goes into your timeline. It can also be strategy and action steps. So make sure you're including your PD to gain the knowledge when you're doing your SMART goals. And then of course, you're going to collect all your data, all your evidence, your pre-test, your exit slips, just, you know, make notes of, we always do Excel, not Excel, but Google Excel, Google whatever, sheets, and we put in our pre-test, our checkpoints, their scores all along the way so that we can track, are they growing? And then we can address the questions. Yes, they are. What do we do next? No, they're not. What do we do next? And so this is really important to have that evidence of effectiveness. And just keep collecting that at the end of my units. I'm going to share with you later. I enter all my SMART goals. I enter, and I haven't finished. I redid those this year, and I haven't finished transferring the last 3 years of data, but so that I can see, is this an effective way of teaching? So it's another way to evaluate, am I meeting my goals in the best way I can? So if you'll advance that one more slide. And then that's me, I'm done. So if you need to look at that form, it is a very helpful form to plan out. I did put the link in the chat. If you scroll up, it should still be there if you're interested in that free reproducible that Solution Tree offers. Thanks. And I believe, is this Mareri? Is it your turn?
That one is Dusty.
Yeah, no, it's not me. Sorry.
It's me. All right. So hopefully we haven't overwhelmed you with too much information today. Just to kind of regroup and kind of talk about what we've done in your PLC journey as you start to do that. You know, you've formed your guiding coalition group. You've met as a building. You've talked about your mission, your vision, your collective commitments. Rosanna got on there and told us, you know, how do we create those SMART goals? How do we, you know, get those there so that we know what we're working towards? The next step you're going to do is you're going to look at those essential standards. Now, some people may say, why do we need essential standards? Well, hopefully in one of your collective commitments that you had said that one thing you want to do is ensure a guaranteed and viable curriculum for the students in your school. Okay. In order to do that, there are 4 questions that the PLC process recommends for those. We will be going through those questions throughout the day. The essential standards kind of focus on the first question. Okay, what do we want students to learn? Okay, so we need to look at this question. This is what's going to drive how we create these essentials. This is how it's going to create our action research plans as we go throughout the year and help students do this. Okay, it's very, very important that you start with this question. And if you don't engage in answering this first question, you are going to struggle at making sure you have a guaranteed and viable curriculum. Okay. You need to understand what you're teaching, you need to understand why you're teaching it, and you need to understand what is the process or the pacing guide of how we're going to teach that. Okay, so if we look at essential standards. Now, keep in mind, we call it essential standards in our school. I have heard power standards before. I have heard promise standards. You know, these are the standards we promise to make sure that our students know, you know, these are our power because they're our strong ones. We must make sure that all students learn these. It's completely up to you what you guys name them, but just know that they all mean the same thing, even though you might hear them as different terms. Okay. Your essential standards are going to be those standards. Now, when I say standards, I'm talking about our state standards per grade level, per subject, specific in there as well. So you're going to identify, okay, what is the knowledge? What is the skills? What is the dispositions that all of our students must learn? So if we said, okay, I want to make sure that when my student leaves the 4th grade in math, for example, will they have all the skills necessary to make sure they are successful in 5th grade? Okay, those are your essential standards. What skills are they going to use for the rest of their life? What skills do we need to make sure that they know? And the same thing for the previous grade. And if those standards aren't mastered, those essentials in the previous grade, you need to make sure that you're hitting those in your different tiers. And we'll talk about that more when we get to the ITI process of it as well. Your essential standards, it's what the majority of your teaching time will consist of. Okay, now, does that mean I'm not going to do all the other ones? No, not at all. You're still going to be hitting on all of your standards, but we all know if you were, and if you've ever seen Mike Matos, you know, he says, you know, it's impossible. There is no way to give enough time to every single standard that your state wants you to do. Okay, so you have to decide and kind of categorize those standards into what are essential. Your essential standards are the ones that your teachers are going to assess. So when you hear later about our different types of our CFAs and our CSAs, and we'll talk about what all of those are and what those means, these are the ones that if you choose them as essential, you're going to have CFAs for those. You're going to have CSAs, okay? You're going to use that data to help drive your instruction when you meet and go over as your PLC teams what that data is giving you. Okay, that data, like I said, it's going to drive your discussions. You know, did one class do better than another class? Was there a common thing that, boy, all students didn't get this? Was there a common misconception? What do we need to look at? Okay, from those data discussions of your essential standards that you have assessed, that is when you're going to decide, okay, I have a student that maybe needs to advance on to tier 2 or tier 3. They need some interventions, or, hey, the students got it. They've mastered it. How can we now extend their learning to a higher level? Okay. All right. So from there, okay, and I've kind of hit on this already, is why do we need these essentials? You know, why are they important? If in our collective commitments, which again, like I said, I hope you have, if we are to ensure that learning is for all students, okay, then we have to make sure that we are saying that first question. Okay, so if we go back to that first question, and let me review that. It's the next slide. That's okay. Okay, remember that first question is, what do we want our students to learn? Okay, we must look at this, look at our standards. We have to know, you know, if they're going to be at high levels, we have to have the expectations for all students. Okay. So if we respond to this, we identify our essential standards, that's going to then take our conversation from the emphasis of what are we teaching to what is it we want to see that the students are learning. Okay. So now, and I do think that there was a question in the chat kind of talking about these. Matthew asked, are the essential standards decided by each team at a school level, or do you find the district determines that? Absolutely, absolutely not the district. It is team. You are the teachers. You are the one in there doing the work. We're going to talk about on the next slide why it's so important that these teachers are doing the work and not somebody else just handing it to you. There is not what we see essential in our school standards is not necessarily what another school may see essential based on their students and the data from their students. Okay, so why should teams do the work? We must as team, just like in the classroom. Okay, if your students are part of making the rules from your classroom, if they're part of maybe the rewards or the goals that they're working towards, I hope that you find that those students, they take a better interest in it. They're a part of, they're working for something that they want to achieve, and they've got that collaboration piece there. Teams should do the work because you know the standards. You know the standards front and back. You know what those standards mean. And you've taught them. You have that recognition of what it is. We need to make sure as a team also, we're consistent. Okay, defining these essential learning standards help us become consistent as a team. Okay, because we all know we could have 6 different classrooms, and yeah, everybody's kind of looking at the same standards in this, but one teacher might put more emphasis on this standard than this teacher. And then, you know, we don't have our common assessments because we're all teaching at different places all over the place. And so we've got to make sure that we have those priorities straight. Now, that doesn't mean that what I do in my classroom has to match exactly how my partner across the hallway teaches in his or her classroom. That's not what we're saying at all. How you teach it is completely up to you and what works best for the students in your classroom. Okay, what we're saying is what has to be taught and the information the students receive from it has to be the similar part of it. Okay, it's very, very crucial that you come up with a pacing guide. Okay, you're going to identify your essential standards. You're going to know what those are. You're going to have to decide, you know, which ones do we need to start at the beginning of the year? Which ones might build upon something else? You know, kind of lay those out throughout your 4 different quarters throughout the year and make sure that everyone's kind of on track. When we get into the assessments later on in our discussion, you're going to find how those need to be given around the same time. Okay, you can't get together, talk about students' data if one teacher's testing 1 week and the other one doesn't test for 2 weeks later. Well, you can't look at that data and decide, what are we doing? What do those students need? Too much time is going by. Okay, we need to make sure that we're all together and having that discussion. Now, you may be thinking, okay, that's great. We're going to determine our essential standards, but what happens to all the rest of the standards? Like, I can't just forget about all the other standards are there. And you're right, you can't. Okay, so we call, oh, hold on. You might have to back out and refresh. Hold on just a second. We have more slides. Yeah, maybe go back up. When the internet decides to work, we'll let you know. Okay, sorry about that. It's loading slowly. All right, so now the next one. Okay, so now 2 different types of standards. Your essentials are your need to know. What have we decided that every single student in our grade needs to know in order to go on to the next grade level to be successful, and so on throughout? Okay, now we don't just forget about all those other standards. Okay, those become what we call our supporting standards. They're good standards to know. We need to make sure that we are still hitting on those standards, that we're still doing activities, that we're still teaching those standards, but they're not as essential as we need to make sure that every single student has mastered it. Okay, so I know it's going to be hard to look at those and go, well, how do I really know what is our essential? What is our supporting? You know, how do I even do that? We completely understand that. And let me say this too, it is an ongoing process. Please never forget that. Okay, we just met, so we identified 3 years ago our essential standards, and we got together and we, you know, and we'll talk about how to get those in a minute, but we go back and look at those every year. Okay, and I think Mandy had mentioned earlier at the end of this year, our grade level teams came in, sorry, not our grade level, our curriculum teams came in. So like all the math teachers came in on one day, all the reading teachers came in on another day, and we put all of those essentials up. Okay, and we said, you know, is what they're learning in 3rd grade and mastering everything that we need for 4th grade and so on, and is everything in 4th grade what they need for 5th grade? And I will tell you, we found that there was some holes, and we found that there was some standards that weren't really essential standards that we thought they were when we looked at the big overall picture. Okay, so for next year, we've changed some of our essentials. We've gotten rid of some of them. We've added some of them. We've made some of our supporting standards part of learning targets of our essential one. So there are many ways you can do this. So please know it's always a working document. Don't think it's a one and done and that's what I have to do. I taught it a year, get to the end of the year and be like, wow, my students didn't really know what they needed to know. Okay, be consistent. That's the key. As a team, are you consistent in agreeing on what you think should change, what shouldn't change? Make sure you're reviewing those collective commitments. Make sure that they're following what it is you want those to do. Okay, so now, how do I take all those standards and determine what is essential? So the best guideline out there, and again, this is a guideline from the PLC at Work process from Solution Tree, and it's kind of an acronym that you can follow called REAL. Okay, these are our real standards. And in order to consider a standard to be essential, we have 4 parts, okay? And they're all part of the REAL. The R is the readiness, okay? Will we make sure, will this standard provide the students knowledge and skills necessary for the next grade level? Okay, if it's not something that's necessary for the next grade level, it may not necessarily be an essential, okay? The E, endurance. What are the knowledge and skills useful beyond a single test or unit of study? Okay, is it going to continue to go? Will that knowledge maybe even be used for other essentials in the next grade level as well? Okay, those assessed. Okay, what are the standards that are likely to be assessed on a state or national exam? We need to make sure that we are preparing students for what the state or the nation thinks are those essential standards, are those areas of knowledge that they feel very important that students know. Okay, and the leverage, knowledge and skills valuable across disciplines. Okay, so as you start creating these standards, as you are looking at what they are, make sure you're asking yourself all of these different steps. If it doesn't hit every single one of these categories, then it is not an essential standard. Doesn't mean it's not an important standard, but maybe it's a standard that should support a different standard. Okay, so don't forget those. All right, so how many standards is essential? There is not a set number. I will tell you that in math, again, because that's what I teach is math, at our 3rd grade level, I believe there are 9 essentials for the entire year. At our 4th grade level, I believe there is 8 essentials for the entire year. Okay, and so a good idea to think about is 7 to 12. Okay, you don't want to have too many because then you can't spend the amount of time that you need on it in order to know that it's effective and you are assessing students with exactly of what they want to know. Okay, so you're kind of looking at those essentials. You've went through the REAL and said, okay, yes, it met the readiness, it met the endurance. It's an essential, that a standard that's assessed, and it gives leverage for other disciplines. Okay, so you've determined those essentials. You need to go back and check, make sure, you know, are they aligned with what we need to know? Okay, once we've recorded those standards, okay, that's where we're going to look from grade level to grade level, or from course to course if you're at a high school level. You know, does it flow? So for example, a standard in 4th grade that we have as an essential is it's under place value, and it's learning that, you know, as you move to the left of the place value, your number gets 10 times bigger. As you move to the right, it gets 10 times less. Okay, this becomes important as 5th grade gets into decimals and using a lot more fractions, and being able to understand how to multiply and divide those fractions, being able to know, you know, if I know 9 times 5, well, I can know 9 times 50 because I could look at 9 times 5 times 10. Well, times 10 just tells me I'm moving to the next place on my place value. Okay, so make sure that that's there. We can't just expect kids to be like, okay, here's your, you know, 9 times 5, and then they get in 5th grade and it wants them to do 9 times 50 or 9 times 500. And in 4th grade, we didn't talk anything about that. Okay, so we need to check and make sure that all of those are going. Okay, Mandy answered that question. Good, thanks.
Thank you. Matt had a question in there. Oh, whoops. You can.
Okay, yeah, Matt had a question in there about the CFAs for essentials and don't do a CFA. Yes, we will talk more about the CFAs, the assessments later. But yes, when I say the assessment piece of the real of the essentials means those are what you're creating your CFAs. Those are what you're creating your CSAs on as well. Okay. And again, in our next session, we'll go in and talk about, like, we're just talking about identifying our essentials, but don't worry, we're not going to leave you hanging. The next one's going to be talking about our learning targets, unpacking those standards, and what we do to get to those assessments. So I promise it'll all flow together by the end of the presentation. I know it's a lot of information, but just bear with us. We're trying to take it step by step here. Okay. Once you have identified, whoops, sorry, go back one more. Once you have identified those essentials, okay, your next step is to go through and look at all of your other standards. Okay, you need to decide those supporting standards, where am I going to put those? Okay, so again, it may be activities, there may be things that you're going over and you're teaching with your supporting standards, but they're not something that you're going to go back and you're going to assess on. But you absolutely still need to be touching on all of your standards, and they will align, I promise. Okay, we just went back, like I said, we just went and changed some of our essentials in our building and took some away, added some more. So now we had to go back and review, okay, so where do those other standards, those standards we took out that we decided weren't really an essential, which standard do they now support? Okay, so you're going to kind of still have an idea on your pacing guide. What are your standards teaching throughout the year? This was something that when we first went to looking at standards and assessing them, our school board was like, okay, wait, you mean you're just going to teach 7 to 12 standards out of the whole curriculum the whole year? No, that's not it at all. And keep in mind, when I say 7 to 12, especially for elementary, 4th grade, that's per grade level. Okay, focus on your reading that you have 7 to 12, your math that you have 7 to 12. Now writing, you may not have 7 or 12 standards, essential standards. You might have one overall standard of, you know, what is up on your test, you know, whether that's narrative, expository, argumentative, all of those differences, but you're going to have learning targets along the way that's going to get you to that at the end. Science, you may not, you know, have as many, there may be a fewer of those, but when I say 7 to 12, definitely need that for your reading and your math. Okay. So anyway, yeah, our board said, you know, well, how do we know that you're teaching all these standards? You know, we need to make sure you're doing what these kids need. And so that's exactly what we did with our supporting standards, is we just created a document and we showed them, okay, here's all of our essentials. Here's the standards that support those essentials. We're still going to hit on those. We're still going to use those. Sometimes they're prerequisites for starting that standard, is we need to go over, you know, place value first before we get into teaching them, you know, times 10 or divided by 10. Okay, if they don't know the place value system, they're going to struggle at doing that. So they do fit into your pacing guide. They do fit into your curriculum so that everything is there. Okay, so we're going to go from there, and I'm going to turn it over and let Murari talk about our learning targets and unpacking after you have identified all of those essentials.
Okay, so once you have determined what your essential standards are going to be, then you will need to go through and unpack each of those standards. And this is something that has to be done with your team. You cannot have the team lead or just like one person be in charge of unpacking the standards. And that is because everyone needs to have an understanding of what is going to be taught and how it is going to be assessed. And so Mandy, if you could hit the next slide. This unpacking of the standards answers the question, what do we want our students to know and be able to do? And here is a quote from Learning by Doing, and it says that it is through the simple yet powerful process of unwrapping standards that the team can come to understand what each standard requires that teachers should teach and students should learn. So why? This is because clarity precedes competence. Unpacking the standards and creating the learning targets from scratch ensures that teachers and students have a clear understanding. When you develop your I can statements, it allows students to monitor and to take ownership of their own learning because they understand what it is they are supposed to do. That's the difference between just putting up the standard on the board and having it in student-friendly language. It also provides the parents or whoever the students' adults are in their lives with an explanation of what it is exactly that they are learning, which makes it easier for them to be able to help their kids out at home. So now we're going to go into the how. And in Learning by Doing, it kind of goes into a breakdown of the steps that you need to take. And I summarized it into 5 steps. The first thing that you should do is identify all the standards. This is going to tell you what the students need to be able to do. In step 2, you can identify the nouns or the phrases that are in the standard, and that will give you an idea of what concepts the standard is asking you to cover. In step 3, you can identify the important context. That may be the type of literature that the students will be reading, the type of problems that they're going to be solving, or any other kind of relevant information. And then from there, once you have all 3 of those parts, you can create your learning targets using I can statements, or today I will be able to, and decide that as a team. From there, you can also determine the DOK levels that will assist whenever you are creating your assessments, which we will talk about later on. So I have an example here for you, and this is a math standard. And so it is for NBT B5, and it focuses on multi-digit multiplication, which is a big chunk of what students do in 4th grade. In 3rd grade, they start off learning, the simple math facts, 1 digit times 1 digit. And here we kind of bump up the rigor of the skill. And so the standard has them multiplying whole numbers up to 4 digits by 1 digit whole number, multiplying 2 digits, two-digit numbers together using strategies based on place value. And so there are a couple different ways that you can go about identifying the 3 pieces. I've seen some teams circle, some teams underline. I personally, with my team, we highlight nouns green. And so you can see in the example, whole numbers, 2-digit numbers, equations, rectangles, arrays, area models are what we highlighted in green. And our verbs, the actions, is what is in blue. Our context, or how it is that they're going to be doing, what it is they're going to be working with, is what is shown in the brackets. And so we go through, we highlight everything, and then we also list it out just so that we all have a clear understanding of what the standard is asking. And then from there, on the next slide, it'll show you how we piece together the verbs and the nouns and the context and turn it into an I can statement. So we ended up with 3 from this one standard. I can multiply a whole number of up to 4 digits by 1 digit number. And we determined that to be a DOK level 1. I can multiply two two-digit numbers, which was also DOK level 1, and I can explain the calculation using numbers, models, and words, which this has a higher depth of knowledge, and it is a level 2. So on the next slide, sometimes it can be a little hard to come up with the DOK level. And so we use these cognitive rigor matrices in order to help us. And Karen has a couple different ones. And so we look at the reading. Oh, can you scroll back up? Where it says tool number 1. If you click on where it says close reading and listening, it'll open up and she'll have PDFs there that are available for the different subjects. And so she has that for reading, and it has like the Bloom's taxonomy on the left and then DOK levels on the top. And so it makes it super easy to go through and match it up. And so it's a good point to base it off of, and your team can have a really good discussion on, you know, what everyone thinks the DOK level should be. And so you see there she has math, writing, social studies, she even has fine arts, PE, world languages, and then career and technical education. And so that is a really good resource that you can use whenever you're unpacking standards. Another resource that my team uses is Wiki Teachers. And so for this one, it is free. And you will have to create an account if you would like to use it. But what it is this state, I believe it's Nevada, their teachers have gone through and have unpacked their standards. They've created learning targets. They have essential questions. They have all of this information available for free for the different grade levels. And so sometimes you're staring at a standard and you have read it and you have read it, and you get stuck, or you just have a brain fart and you cannot think of it. And so sometimes you say, what can I do? We are not in agreement. We are not in consensus. Like this makes no sense to us. So sometimes you need a little help, and it's useful to be able to go on this website and see what another team has already done. So the recommendation is to just use it in order to get an idea, in order to get some inspiration. I would not recommend just copying everything off of this website exactly, because this is based on that state's requirements. It is based on those teachers' opinions and their kids. What they have will not be the exact thing that you need, especially considering that their standards, although they are Common Core, it's not Arkansas standards. And so that is a tool that you can use, but you have to make sure that you use it wisely. But it is available, and it is linked in the PDF presentation document that was put in the chat. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So once you have your learning targets developed and all your DOK levels, what you can do next is you can go through and tie in those supporting skills, those other essential standards or non-essential standards, your nice to knows that would help students with this skill that you're working on. We also went ahead and we listed strategies. It's math, so it's a little more specific to what that standard was requiring, which was for them to be able to multiply using base 10 strategies. And so we just went ahead and listed those out so that all of the teachers knew exactly which strategies we would be expecting the kids to master. And that is what we were going to be looking for. So once you have all of those things, before you start your assessments, you go through and you decide what exactly is going to be considered proficient. And so the 3 with the asterisk on it has the requirements for proficiency. A 4 would be what is considered advanced or beyond the regular expectation. A 2 would be kids that are technically considered close. They're almost there. They might make a silly mistake here or there, or they have some sort of misunderstanding that when you go through and you talk to them, they can fix it and then show that they have proficiency on the CSA. And then a 1 is kids that are starting, they need some additional help. slide. And then we also go through and we pick out vocabulary for tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 words, just to make sure that the language that is being used in the classrooms is consistent throughout the grade level, so that whenever they do take the CSA and the CFA and any other sort of like state assessment, they have an understanding of the vocabulary, and that is not something that is going to trip them up whenever they are trying to answer questions. And that is all on my part.
Okay, we're going to come back together. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We're going to come back together and just kind of catch up everything that we have studied this far. We know that there's a lot. This is a lot to take in a short amount of time. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen if I can get it over here, perhaps. A second. There we go. And let us come together and just have a conversation, ask questions. You know, we've talked a lot this morning about guiding coalition, mission, vision, collective commitments. We talked a lot about SMART goals, and then we're getting into the meat of it, especially with question 1. Question 1 is vital. You guys, you can't move forward without your teams doing the work of what do we want our students to know and be able to do. Clarity precedes competence. All the time, you have to be so clear on what it is that we expect our students to know and be able to do at every single grade level. So let's talk. Give us some questions that you have up to this point. We'd like to be done about 10:30, and then we'll give you an extended lunch 10:30 to 12 and come back to finish up this afternoon. So let's visit. Let's talk about any burning questions that you have that we can answer for you. Don't be shy. We don't bite.
Yes, I have a question about the cultural mindset shift. In that area, how would you compare that to the standards and the goals that are set?
So the mindset shift connected to now identifying essential standards, is that what your question is?
Yes.
Okay. So honestly, at first, my experience of observing the staff, it was a little bit, they were nervous. And as Dusty was talking about, now we revisited at the end of this school year and kind of pulled some that we thought were essential and actually determined that they were more supporting. That happened because they were nervous about letting go, right? Like there's, 25 standards in math for 4th grade or whatever the number happens to be. And you're wanting us to go down to like 9? No, we've got to have this. We've got to stick with this. We've got to. And so initially in the process, we held on to maybe like 12. And then we took the time though to identify those essentials across like a spreadsheet. And then we had the teachers go back in and put in the rest of the standards, those supporting standards, under where they would be taught through the essentials. Does that make sense? We wanted to assure them that you're still teaching those strategies and skills through those standards, but ultimately you are making a promise to our community, to our families, that they will not leave 4th grade without knowing these 9 big rocks. And the other standards are going to come up underneath. So what happened is that very first year, and we were a little bit nervous, but then there was a shift. The teachers became so confident. They were diving deeper into those essential standards than they had ever done before. It was no longer just a covering of standards. It was diving deep down. And they saw the benefit of okay, these are supporting standards. I don't have to assess those to mastery. I have to assess these essentials to mastery.
Okay, thank you.
All right, come on. I know you've got some questions out there. We've talked about a lot of information today. Guiding coalition, building leadership team, perhaps. Okay. How do you manage getting to all your essential standards when you have a curriculum to follow like Eureka Math? That has been my biggest struggle, especially since the lessons usually build off of each other. Okay, this is touchy, and I'm just going to say it because that's what Mike and all the other big ones would do. I'm just going to be Mike right now. Eureka Math is a tool. Okay, your standards should guide everything that you do. Eureka Math is great. We use ECM, CGI at the lower, but it's not every day moving on to page 12, moving on to page 14, moving on to page 15. Our standard is our curriculum. We teach to that standard, and our tools can be anything that we feel like matches the best instructional strategies, the best instructional tool to teach that standard. And I know that that's touchy, but Eureka Math may not be what every single student needs in your classroom. It may hit the majority of them, and that's fantastic. But what else do those other 3 or 4 students need? And so it is important that we see our books and our computers and the papers, the worksheets as tools. Those are tools to be able to teach to those standards. We are getting ready to adopt a new reading program, and we're super excited about it because it's got a lot of great tools for the teachers. But here's one thing that my teacher said when we were told we needed to get a new reading series. Okay, Dr. Barrett, does this mean that we have to turn the page every single day? And because that's not how we teach anymore. I was thrilled to hear that. I was thrilled that my staff said that because it's a tool. So we're going to take our time, we're going to go through that series, and we're going to find where does that tool help to teach towards our standards. So again, it's that mind shift. It's a tool. That's a tough one. Will you address RTI strategies to use with small groups? Yes, we have a whole section on RTI, one of my favorite things to talk about. So yes, Allison, we are going to get to RTI this afternoon, and it's a big one. I love your questions. And guys, remember, that's what this whole team is about. This is 4th grade, right? That's all we're talking about, are 4th grade and 4th grade teachers. And this is your team. This is your team that you can ask those questions, those hard questions. We can have those hard conversations together. You will be able to reach out to us to schedule a time if you would like with your 4th grade team. We can meet with you on Zoom. We can email back and forth. We can share, that's what we're here for, is just for 4th grade in the state of Arkansas, which I think is amazing. When I have worked alongside some of my best friends in Solution Tree, they are talking about Arkansas and the way that Arkansas is moving the PLC process forward. And these type of things that Arkansas is allowing us to do is only making us stronger as a team and as a state. So use us. We really do. And we may not have all the answers right away, but we have speed dial that we can get some people to answer those questions for you. I will talk for just a minute while you're thinking of some more questions, because I know that you've got some.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Yeah.
Going back to Amy's question about, that, and I understand, Amy, so coming from the teacher side of point of view, it's great if you have a principal that understands this process and what to do, and they're supportive of that. But going back to places where I've been, where we've told, you know, you have to go piece by piece through this book. So when Mandy stated, you know, that we would work with you, we'd have conversations, we welcome you to invite your principals in as well, your administration. You know, if we need to have some conversations with them, that's great. Amy, I challenge you to go back and look at, I know that they build upon one another, but is there just bits and pieces? Is there, you know, if you have a workbook or something to it, is there just a part of that worksheet that you could pull out for them to do? And then maybe you're using other tools and other resources to help along with it. I know that seems overwhelming and that seems like a lot. And, you know, maybe you can't go up against your principal and be like, hey, we've got to do something else. We're there to help you. We're there to support you. We'll do what we can to have those conversations and have those with your principals. But that's how we kind of got away from using our curriculum. We have Math in Focus. There are still some parts that we pull from Math in Focus. There's some ways that they explain things that help kids understand that. It's just not like, we don't order the workbooks every year. We don't, you know, we don't necessarily get our textbooks out every day. There are different teachers that use it for different ways to help support what they feel helps those essential standards. So if you can just pull bits and pieces and not use all of it, maybe that would help you get closer to looking at just using it as a tool instead of having to use it every day, page by page. So hopefully that helps give you some ideas and maybe some conversations you can have with your principal as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Dusty, for that. And again, that is exactly the purpose of this. I am an administrator. I'm not in the trenches using it every day. I help to guide and support, but we want you asking those type of questions, those hard questions. And we had another question from Allison, more of a statement piece. We're doing a lot of these strategies, but we're new to this. That's great. That's fantastic. Welcome aboard. We can't wait to watch things happen for you and your school. And then going on, when meeting with our teams, we've not really had a guide on what to do while we meet together. So we were the same way when we first started out. It was almost like, okay, well, it's a compliance. I'm jumping through a hoop. I'm going to meet at 2:30 on Friday because that's what we're supposed to do. Once you start implementing these pieces that we're getting into, like Dusty with the identification of essential standards and Mareri with the unpacking of those standards, there won't be a time that you really are questioning what in the world are we going to do for this hour. Like, the hour is going to speed by because you're constantly revisiting, just as Dusty was talking about, we still revisit our standards. We still make sure before we do a unit of study that we have the understanding of an unpacked standard and where we're headed next. We're continually looking at data from a CFA. So yes, and Alice and I love that because we all experience that when we first start out in this process. And schools that I work with everywhere, it's kind of my hour could be better spent doing something else. You couldn't take this away from the teachers at this point ever, because it is who we are and it's how we do business. And we see such gains with our children because all of us are at the table. So thank you for that notice, you know, like that's exactly what happens here. So very good. All right. Great questions, you guys.
I just wanted to share also, in addition to that, this might help Allison out. We just had, I'm in Texarkana, and we just had a big solution tree training, and we had a consultant here with us. And one of the things they told us was, if you go to any book on the Solution Tree website and you search that and you scroll down, they have all the free reproducibles or free study guides available. So I looked up the book that you told us about, the Making Teamwork Meaningful, and scrolled down, and there's a lot, you know, all the reproducibles from that book that you can actually click on that are the tools. And so you could get any of those for free. I know y'all linked, you know, some in, but if you wanted additional, if anyone wanted additional resources, we have been scrolling through all of these different books and finding all that information, that can become overwhelming too. But I appreciate you sharing that book, because I've already been looking at some of the templates and things that we can use during our collaborative team meetings and things like that. So that, and the book is actually on sale for $5 right now. So if anybody wants to actually purchase the book.
Great. Thank you, Tanya, for sharing that too. And yes, Solution Tree's website is full of free and so many protocols, and it's really amazing. One of my favorites, and I mentioned this earlier, but one of my newest favorites is the Big Book of Tools. And it's Bill Ferreter who wrote this book, and it is just exactly that. Like, it is full of all kinds of just protocols to use with your team. You can look it up in the back as to, you know, what it is that maybe you're struggling with, and it'll give you just all kinds of resources to use with your teams. It starts from the get-go, from guiding coalition to creating your norms, getting into essentials, all of those pieces. So, you know, just sometimes it's nice just to have something that you can grab and go to and not have to recreate something. There's just so many resources. Another great resource through Solution Tree is Global PD. And it's got videos of Mike Mattos and Cassandra Erkins and, you know, all of the Tim Brown, and just little blurbs of it, you know, no longer than about 10 minutes each. I like to use those in my staff meetings at times, where I can just bring those back around so that we're staying current, and we're, you know, revisiting the things that we might be struggling through. Because guys, this is a process. Like, it's never ending. You're never going to be there. While we may be a model PLC school, we still have things that we need to work on, because it's never done. And it's never done because we continue to have new students, right? We have to meet the needs of all of our students, and they're not the same every year. You know, they're not the same any year. So it's important that we stay current, and that we are always looking in the mirror and reflecting and making sure, you know, that we are doing right by the process and by our students. Any other questions or comments?
They might have after lunch after they digest.
All right. Yes. After lunch, I'm sure, after you think through some things. I will tell you one thing. I love working with schools on identifying essential standards. But number one is that unpacking piece that Mareri was going through. One of the things that I love to share with those teams, there's a standard in first grade, and I know we're fourth grade, but there's a standard in first grade that is telling time. I can tell time to the hour and half hour using analog and digital clocks. And I'm telling you this because that one little statement, one sentence, has 8 learning targets under it. And if we don't identify and we don't unpack those standards the way that they need to be unpacked, then we are doing a disservice to our students. So if you think about that standard, I can tell time to the hour using analog clocks. Okay, that's one learning target. Another one, I can tell time to the hour using digital clocks. Those are 2 separate skills that need to be assessed in a CFA to make sure that they get each little piece of that standard. So the importance of unpacking standards to learning targets, I can't stress that piece enough. Like, it is so important that your teams pull apart and grab those learning targets so that we are mastering, you know, we are teaching to mastery of those standards. Most of the students can tell time to the hour on a digital clock, but an analog clock. So I don't need to spend the time working on digital if what the children are struggling with is analog. And so it really does help your team to clarify how we're going to intervene for these students. And we will talk through the RTI process, and this is all going to come together as one big piece when we get to it this afternoon. It's really pretty powerful, and it gets me excited because I guess I don't know, I'm a PLC nerd or something, but it's just one of my favorite things to really bring it all together and impact what we're doing in the classroom. So, okay, well, we're going to then go ahead and stop, and we will do 10:30-ish. We got a little bit of time, but we will come back together, Lindsay, if it's okay, at noon. So we'll have a lunchtime from 10:30 to noon, and then come back together and do the last part of the day. Is that good?
That sounds great. And I will stop the recording.
Perfect. Okay, well, we're going to jump right back in here then. I hope everyone had a great lunch. It's nice in the summer. We can eat and relax a little bit while we're eating too. I do hope you had some time just to think through and process through some of the things that we talked about this morning. We are going to jump right into units of study, and Miss Rosanna is going to be leading that for us. So I'm going to turn it right over to her and we'll get started.
Thanks, Mandy. Sorry, it took me just a minute here. Okay, so on your units of study, this is so much information, y'all, and I just really, I've really enjoyed this book, Unstoppable Learning. So I'm not hired by Solution Tree or anybody like that. This isn't a promo. I just find that this book is very valuable to me personally. So I just wanted to start off kind of asking you some questions. For example, have you ever gone to the doctor's office? Of course, everybody has. And you go in, has the doctor just told you, hey, you know, I think that you display symptoms that are similar to this group of people over here. And so I'm just going to prescribe to you whatever, same thing I give them, and we'll hope for the best. Well, you probably aren't going to go back to see that doctor because you really want that individualized health attention. So how powerful do you think it would be if each and every school could promise the best care to every student through focused instruction and best research? What if we could individualize each lesson and learning to meet the needs of those students? So that's kind of a powerful thought to have for my first slide. So if you're on slide 2, the Unstoppable Learning Framework outlines how to cohesively implement 7 elements of highly qualified teaching and learning. But today we're going to talk about planning and creating those lessons. It would just be too overwhelming to try to cover all of it. And really, it's pretty overwhelming just covering the planning, and execution part of the lessons. So when you're thinking of planning, you may think, oh, I know how to plan. I've got this textbook that the school district gave me. And in here, I'm going to practice these examples, and I'm going to have my class practice them. I might find one more way to pull in that practice. Then I'm going to give them some homework to practice. And then the next day, you might review that homework and then do some direct instruction and introduce some new material. You might give them a puzzle or play some quick game that the textbook recommends. And then you would just repeat. So typically that's how we used to look at planning. Now we just really rely heavily on those meaningful and deep discussions centered around our state standards, and then we design our instruction accordingly. So when we consider planning, we know the process is multifaceted. We know it's complex. We know it's much richer when we engage in understanding the standards in a collegial huddle rather than an individual silo. I was at one time a singleton, so I know how that feels. But since the PLC process has entered my district and my team, I either meet vertically or I meet with teachers from other schools. This state team has been awesome because I have learned so much and been so inspired by the teachers on the state team. So it doesn't really matter if you are a singleton, you can find others to collaborate with. Really, this and the time you spend planning That's the foundation for success for you and your students. On slide 3, I talk a little bit about designing the effective instruction, and the unstoppable learning wants you to start with all the crucial questions. Of course, what do your students need to know? What are they able to do? How will we know the students have learned? What will we do when they have not learned? When they already know the content, what do we do? But all of these answers reside in this. What instructional practices must we embed to ensure the students learn? So on slide 4, you can see that the US curriculum is typically what they call the snorkeling curriculum, because it covers many topics in less depth. Just like a snorkeler can cover a large area, but it has to stay near the surface, and they're unable to uncover what lies deeper. Conversely, the deep sea diving approach takes time to teach the fewer concepts well, but with intensity, to intentionally explore deep, rich content to reach that profound understanding. So we're going to have to shift from being masters of providing a well-rounded, mile-wide curriculum about many things that only go an inch deep, because that's all you really have time for, and then expose our students to the deep sea learning to develop that depth of understanding and problem skills that we really expect them to know when they leave their academic career behind and enter the workforce. So we're just going to seize that opportunity, and we're going to value the fewer, deeper, and more sophisticated standards, which of course leads us into our essential standards. So on slide 5, you will see that you start planning by intentionally choosing your deep sea diving standard, unpacking your standard, and you plan to engage your students with this standard. So now I'm going to ask you another question. It's going to seem kind of off the wall, but have you ever been in a scavenger hunt? And the coordinator gives you a clue to go to a specific location. And if you're correct, you make it to that next location and you get the clue and you're so excited, and you go and you keep going through all of this until you finally get at the end and you've won, or you got a prize because you ended up in the right location. But more times, it's more likely that you might misread a clue and you'll end up at the wrong location. So as Mandy had told us a little bit earlier, this is what happens to hardworking teachers who sometimes do not understand the depth required by the standards, or they read a standard in isolation instead of considering the whole group of learning targets that go with it. And it's this whole group of learning targets that develop into a bigger picture for your unit. Sometimes you just fail to choose a strong instructional or assessment approach aligned with the standards. And without considering all of the learning targets and standards together and then designing a lesson, it's possible to end up at that wrong location. And I'm just going to share, I have made that mistake. I have read my learning target, focused on it, executed a beautiful lesson. My kids did phenomenal. They all grew. I'm so proud. I moved to the next step and realized, guess what? I didn't actually prep them into learning the next step. I was not successful. I thought I was, but upon reflection, I realized I wasn't. But this is part of our process, that reflection, fixing those mistakes. It's just human to make those mistakes. And sometimes you don't know you're making them until you get to the end result and go, yeah, that wasn't what I expected. So don't get discouraged, just reflect and redo. It's not a big deal. I mean, sort of, but not really. It's just part of the process. So our goal in unit design is to be able to execute our standards well and deeply, and therefore we will create our viable curriculum. The CUES acronym, okay, on the first slide, I see that. Let me go back really quickly and I'll tell you about the CUES. I'm so sorry. So it's choosing the standard, unpacking the standard, and engaging the students in a learning. So you have to prepare those things ahead of time. And that's part of unpacking your standards. When you unpack the standards, you're going to choose your learning targets and probably essential questions and those sort of things. So does that answer your question, Matthew? Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Now I've lost what slide we're on. 6, was it 6? So when you are planning your lesson, you definitely want to go ahead and design the launch of your lesson. You're going to include everything you can think of. And I know some of you are probably veteran teachers, and I know that as a veteran teacher, I was not real excited about having to sit down and write down all these details out, but I promise you, if you just do that, just write down some details, make yourself notes, you're going to be so surprised at the difference it really, really makes. So during your planning, you want to go ahead and design the launch of your lesson. You're going to decide how you're going to explain what the students are about to learn, because you want the students to know, hey, this is what you're going to learn. You're going to create your probing question. How are you going to connect your new learning with your prior learning? You want to prepare your students for how they will learn, their group procedures, your whole group procedures, what you expect in the independent work part. You want to plan your hook. I read about a teacher who planned her hook, and I just, every time I think about this, it just cracks me up. But she actually planned to trip at the front of the classroom and drop her bundle of papers. And she executed it beautifully, tripped, dropped her papers. Then she made the students pick them up, but then they had to look at them and put them in order. And it was about the lesson. And so they had to put them in order. And so this was a thing that really just stuck with the kids. I know you can't trip every single lesson, but I mean, this just stuck with the kids. They remembered it. It was something she felt was essentially important that they remember. And I thought, wow, I would never have thought to stage a fall, a trip, and drop things and then have them put them in order. And I thought that was, the kids thought it was completely by accident. They were just thrilled that their teacher made a mistake and they could help her fix it. But I'll tell you, learning occurred. So another aspect that you want to include, let me get back to the topic, is to write out any common misconceptions you know that students may have. And this is so you can plan to help those students reconstruct and internalize their new knowledge. Okay, so on slide 7, I just want to reiterate that an essential standard is defined as a standard that provides students the prerequisite knowledge and skills needed to know and understand grade level content, and that they are non-negotiables. So those are things that you are guaranteeing your students will know. So you want to ask yourself, what prior knowledge do these students need to be successful? So then you unpack your standards, which will help you identify the lessons within your unit. So when you unpack your standard, you determine those learning targets, the essential questions, the proficiency targets, the learning strategies and activities, and include that technology you plan to integrate, your assessments, any resources and materials you're going to need to implement your lesson. Remember, by carefully planning out every detail, you are executing standards well and deeply, and you are creating a viable curriculum. So the next thing you can do is use this list to address each learning target, using this approach to create a unit of essential learning for the standard. And the list just kind of helps keep you on track. So it's also a freebie off the website. On slide 8, while you're putting together your lessons, oh, I'm sorry, maybe the checklist is on this one. I apologize. It will prioritize your information. You want to include in your lesson, what is the essential learning? Why is it important? How does this learning connect to prior experiences? What activities do you have planned? What aspect lends itself to an element of intrigue and your common misconceptions? And then on slide 9, just to wrap it up, you'll need to decide your essential standard. Unpack the standard into logical pieces of learning. Develop the lesson addressing every aspect of the lesson. Launch your lesson, and most importantly, reflect, collaborate, and gather data. So now I repeated some of my points, but I think those are vital points to setting up your unit. When you go to set up your unit, you will have the umbrella of the main standard and then the learning targets underneath. and each learning target will be an individual lesson. And I believe that completes my part of the units of study. I hope I didn't go too fast.
No, not at all, Rosanna, not at all. We appreciate that so much. Another resource for the unit planning, Maria Nilsson does a phenomenal 15-day unit planning piece, and it is part of the Institutes. I'm not sure how many of you are getting that opportunity to see those live institutes that they're doing now, but she does a breakout room with the 15-day unit planning piece. She also has that as part of a book, and I'll get that information for you too, but she has a whole bunch of resources in there, and I'm sure that if we typed in 15-day unit planning or Maria Nilsson, you would be able to find that very quickly. And I actually did that with one of the schools that I was working with here in Arkansas, and it just really solidified things for them. It was just one of those things that it just brought everything together and made sense for them. So definitely take a look at that as well. All right, go ahead.
Mandy, I did want to add one thing. On this Unstoppable Learning book, it does talk about DOK levels and how to decide on the DOK level, what criteria it needs to meet. It does talk about rigor, and it's a really great book to help you. It does give you all kinds of suggestions and ideas for activities. And this is the handbook that I have for Unstoppable Learning. So it comes with all the templates and all the things. There are two Unstoppable Learnings. One's the handbook and one's a bigger, thicker book. And they have all kinds of activities, and they just really go deep. They dive deep. So
very good. I love getting the opportunity to talk those resources, and I'm not as familiar with the Unstoppable Learning, so that gives me something to look forward to. And I saw that Amy had put in the chat that her school is doing the 15-day unit planning coming up. So I'm excited, Amy. I hope that you'll share with us as a fourth grade, just as our state, how that worked out for you guys. So awesome, awesome. All right, we're going to turn it over now to Marari, and she is going to talk assessments. This one is super, super fun and super important as well. So I'm going to let her jump on here and we will get started with assessment.
Okay, so we're kind of going to go backwards a little bit. With assessments, it's important that you start with the end in mind. You need to have your assessments in order to answer the question, how will we know if each student has learned it? And so you'll need to have your common formative assessments and your common summative assessments completed before you can actually start your unit planning. So I just wanted to point that out real quick. So using a common assessment means that the students who are in the same curriculum and are expected to acquire the same knowledge, skills, and dispositions are going to be assessed using the same instrument or the same process, either at the same time or within a very narrow window of time. So the timing is important because, for example, if I'm going to follow the unit plan and we decide that we're going to do an assessment on Monday, but my team teacher says, you know, I don't feel very confident. I think I need a couple more days. And she takes 2 extra days to continue teaching, then our data is not going to be valid because there will be a big difference in our results due to that extra time that she would have received. So that little part there is very, very important. So why use common assessments at all? In learning by doing, it brings up these 7 points. The first is to promote efficiency for teachers. So I am a fairly new teacher. I am going into my 3rd year. And when I came into my school building, they were already in their 3rd year of the PLC pilot. And since then, we've actually become a model school, and we are currently working on high reliability schools. We do have our highly effective school certification. So this is really all that I've ever known. So I know from things that I've heard from other teachers in the building that before they were doing a lot more work compared to what they are doing now. Yes, it took a while to get used to the PLC process, and it took a while to get everything started. But once you get going, everything really flows together. So in the past, you could almost say that the teachers were doing double the work because they were working independently and there was not as much collaboration. And when you use common assessments, everybody has a say in how the assessment is created, and it is used throughout the whole grade level instead of 2 or 3 teachers each working on their own and developing their own assessments and doing this the whole year. So it really promotes efficiency in the building. It also promotes equity for the students because all of the students for 4th grade will be graded the same way. And so there's no educational lottery being played where this teacher might grade on participation, this teacher grades for showing their work, this teacher grades for turning stuff in. Everything is a level playing field. And so point number 3 says that it is used to determine whether your guaranteed curriculum is actually being taught and learned. So your data is a point of proof. Number 4 says that it informs the practices of individual teachers. If we are doing a common formative assessment on multiplication and I give the assessment, my team teacher gives their assessment, and there is a big gap in the data and the percent of students proficient, then I, reflecting on it, go, hey, like, what did you do? I did this. I don't know what I did. Maybe I need some help. Maybe you used a different strategy than I did. Can you show me? Can you teach me? And that's where you really start to build those relationships within the teachers in order to benefit the kids and their learning. Number 5 says you build a team's capacity to achieve their goals. This ties into working towards meeting your SMART goals for the end of the year, your end of the year state testing. Number 6, to create systematic and collective responses for students that are experiencing some sort of difficulty. This prevents students from falling through the cracks, and you're able to kind of catch them up in time instead of waiting for the end of the year and going, oh, that kid, they were always almost there, but never quite got to proficiency. You're able to catch them a lot sooner and close those gaps for them, which this past year especially was super important. With COVID and all of the things that were going on, trying to get everybody to stay afloat, this point is why. That's a big reason why. And then the last point, point number 7, it builds the confidence of the teachers to be able to look at an assessment that you've created, whether from scratch or from a collection of different resources, and say, you know, I did this. I put this together with my team, and we are going to use it in the classroom, and it's a source of confidence to be able to have that tool in your toolbox. And so we're going to look at the difference between formative and summative assessments real quick. A quick way to keep those two separate is that formative assessments are for learning. They're in the moment throughout the unit, and they're frequent and interactive. So you use them to kind of gauge where your students are and see if you need to adjust your teaching. They also help guide your next steps in instruction. If you notice that your students are really catching on to a skill that you're working on, you're not going to necessarily spend as much time focusing on it if they already have it. You wouldn't beat a dead horse. And so you might throw in some more of those nice to knows, or you might even up the rigor a little bit and give them a challenge to see if it, you know, forces them to use their brain a little more. A summative assessment is of learning. So this usually has a deadline, considering like our end of unit test or like ACT Aspire, those type of things are considered summative assessments. With the PLC process, however, your end of unit test, it is summative, but it might only be summative for some students, in the sense that if you have kids that have not mastered the skill, the learning target, they haven't shown proficiency yet, you just stop there and go, okay, well, the unit is over, we're done, we're gonna move on. You would do some reteaching tier 2 interventions and then give them a reassessment, which would make that summative assessment formative for them, because you're not going to just leave them behind. You're going to keep working with them until they do get it. So that's just a point to keep in mind. Thank you. So different types of formative assessments. It could be super simple, such as whiteboards, having them do a quick math problem and show you. It could be something like hand signals where the kids show you, they got it, they don't got it quite yet, or like they're almost there. I like to do 4 corners if I'm going to do like a multiple choice question on the board and project it. And so then the kids go to A, B, C, or D, depending on what corner in the room I'm going to use. I'm just listening to classroom discussions, any kind of observations during small group work, and screeners that you may provide. Then the next slide talks about summative assessments. Like I mentioned before, the end of unit assessments, any benchmarks. You could even do a presentation or some sort of portfolio or project in that sense. Standardized testing, such as ACT Aspire, or any other end of year testing that you give students. So the common assessments are a tight aspect of the PLC process. There's things that are considered tight, there's things that are considered loose. Strategies are something that is loose. The teacher has a choice in how they want to go about doing things, but the way that they're assessed is going to be the same throughout the grade level. Common meaning that they are built together in collaboration and everyone agrees on what is going to be considered proficient, how it's going to be graded, instructions, all of those tiny pieces. So I included some examples of a CSA and a CFA and a reassessment, and they are all based on the standard that I had shown previously when we were going through the unpacking. And so if you look at it, this is a CFA, and I think it is CFA 2. It focuses on one of the learning targets, and so it's pretty simple. It just says I can multiply a whole number of up to 4 digits, and it has a spot on there where you could put the score, the percent, and then this is one that I give to in my school. This is what we use, and so we have our students, after it's been graded, go through and highlight where they are. And so if they got all their points, or they got 75%, that's considered a got it. So they would highlight got it. I think this one was out of 4 points. So if it was to 50, it would be almost there because it's half. And then if they got 1 or less, they would be considered starting. And so that provides them with a little reflection piece. And so if you scroll down, I think it's just 4 questions. And so there was 2 naked problems and then 2 word problems. And that is all. They're only doing that first learning target 14 target. And so then if you go to the CSA, were they both CFAs? Oh no, that is my bad. But okay, click on the reassessment. How about that? Okay, so it's actually fine because really all of our assessments are formatted the same way. We use the same kind of template and we just adjust it based on the number of questions or the structure that we might need for that particular one. So here you can see 15 and 16, which is multiplying 2 two-digit numbers and then explaining. And so the questions are 2 parts, part A, part B. And so part A on this one, they are going to have to solve it, circle the answer. And then in part B, they would explain using their numbers, models, and words. So that's where they would show their work. They would draw their area model, and then they would give me their steps. Like first, I decomposed the number. Then I multiplied, this number and this number. I added together all my products. My sum was this, and that is how they would get their points. And so the CSA would be just a combination of the CFA and these 2 learning targets put together. And that is how those are created. For the reassessments, you don't need to give them the whole CSA again with just different problems. that is not necessary if they've already shown that they have mastery of some of the learning targets. So for example, on that redo, if the student could give me the answer, they could do the multiplication and give me the correct answer, but maybe their model was off. It was drawn incorrectly, or it just didn't match. There was some sort of silly mistake. Then I would just expect them to fill out that part B. I wouldn't grade the learning target 15 again, because I already know that they can do it. So I'm not going to put that on there as a level of frustration for them. And I think that was the last slide for me. Yes.
All right. Perfect. Thank you, Marari. That was wonderful. And Matthew did share that Phil Warwick had some great information on a video, I believe is what he said. A good webinar a few weeks ago about how to design your CSAs and CFAs. There is so much out there, you guys. There's so much on assessment. The entire assessment team with Solution Tree, they're just powerful people. They are very much Nicole Dimmick and Cassandra Erkins, Tom Schimmer, any of their books. I've got a ton of them up here that talk about assessments as well. There's so much out there. And again, just like we were talking about, Solution Tree has a ton of those free resources and the global PD videos that can help you design your CSAs and CFAs. And I think that that's one of the things that I see the most when I'm working with schools is a lot of times the schools will say, okay, we need help with assessments. Okay, where are you in the process? Have you identified essential standards? No, not really. Have you unpacked your standards? No, not really. Well, all of those things lead up to a good solid assessment plan. So sometimes we have to take steps back to move forward, to go slow, to go fast, as Mike would say. We have to make sure that we have all those other pieces that we've talked about earlier today in place to make sure that our assessments are the way that they need to be. And another thing that teachers kind of get overwhelmed with, well, I'm not a test maker. You know, there's people who get paid big bucks with Pearson and all those other companies to make those questions. You're right, we're not. We weren't trained in that. We may have, received some snorkeling, as Rosanna had put it, the very wide information about creating assessments. But what you'll find is over time, you may find some really great questions and pieces of the tools that you have, but you'll get really good at it. You'll start to figure out those questions and how to ask those questions in a way that your students will be able to show you what they know and what they're able to do. So I do encourage you as you move into that assessment piece, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to take that leap and use some of those questions that you feel like are good from whatever resources. But I think you'll find that you will start to design those assessments the way that they are needed for your students the best. All right, any questions, anything to add? Dusty, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and remind you that just as we talked about your essentials, your supporting, that they change, it's okay if you give that CFA or you give that CSA and you're like, ooh, that didn't really do what I wanted it to do. Know that those are ongoing documents. Those should be reviewed after each one. When you have your collaboration time with your different PLCs, whether it's vertical, whether it's by grade level, whether it's by subject, make sure that you can still answer those 4 questions, that they are the REAL that we talked about earlier, and that they follow those standards, and that you are really truly assessing that. Because sometimes we give an assessment and we're like, ooh, that didn't really give me what I wanted it to give me. So please don't think that once you create that, oh, there's my piece. It's none of this process, any part of it is a one and done and you move on. It is continually a working document, and it's okay if it doesn't go right the first time. Like that's the whole purpose of it, gathering that data and moving on to that as well. So please know that they are changing documents, fluid documents, that you need to keep reevaluating and relooking at.
Oh, real quick, Dusty brought up a good point. You should always go back and review your assessments, your learning targets, your essential standards, especially if you have like a new team member join or you switch grade levels. It's important that everybody kind of has an understanding of the whole process going into it together. I know I came into a new team this year because I moved up from 3rd grade to 4th grade. And I really appreciated the fact that my new team teacher took the time to go through the essential standards and see if I agreed or if I had any input, anything that I could provide coming up from 3rd grade. And so reviewing it is a very, very, very essential part. So good thing, Dusty.
Very good. Thank you, ladies, both for jumping in there on that. Assessment is huge, and it's a huge part. I did want to address something in the chat. Amy had mentioned, let's see, we can't see the questions on our common assessments before the students take them. I wish we could help design them. You should be designing them. I know that you talked about using iReady, that you use iReady for this. So Amy, I'm going to ask you a question about that. So on iReady, do you guys get to create assessments inside of iReady? We use Lexia for our program, but we don't create our common assessments in that. Is that where you guys are doing that, or they're pushed down to you? How does that work for you guys? You can jump on, or
they just give us, I mean, they just give us the assessment, and then we tell them like what standards. I mean, she literally just takes the standard and sends it to the company, I think, and they put together some questions, but we're not even allowed to see them beforehand.
Yeah. I definitely, Amy, I would definitely encourage, the conversations definitely need to happen, because what it sounds like from my perspective of what you're saying is the overarching standard basically is what your students are given for common assessment pieces, whereas they need to be focused on the learning targets under the broad standard instead of just the broad standard, because that's in this next piece we're going to talk about RTI. How do you know what to intervene on underneath that broad standard if there's pieces under it that the children are getting or not getting? So definitely some conversations around, you all should be creating those common assessments amongst your team based on your learning targets, so that you can get that data turned around quickly, provide feedback quickly, and then make some intervention decisions around that. Does that make sense for you?
Yes, it does. And I agree.
I got you. I understand. And that's the beauty of this whole thing, is we're on your team. We are on your team. We're on the state team. We are all about just how can we best help to make this process better for everyone. And we had to learn those things along the way too. And so did I as the building administrator. And I think that that's where some conversations will need to happen, and we will help with that any way that we can. So, all right. Are there any other questions around assessment? I know that is quick over something that is very not quick.
Mandy, I just wanted to make a comment to Amy and to anyone else in those shoes. I understand that some districts do set the pace and they set what is going to happen. And so until everyone is on board, you just have to try your very best to work around that. And sometimes I think they, even the administrators, like I work for a very large district, and I feel like our administrators are still not getting the whole picture because they are setting district essential standards. And I keep saying, how can I meet those essential standards for the district when my student needs are not there yet? So it's a big ongoing conversation. I don't know how friendly your district is or your peeps are, but hopefully they can keep an open mind and eventually change will happen, because everybody wants learning to take place. And really, honestly, I feel like those common formative assessments that is created by the team do enhance learning for the students.
Yeah, I agree, Rosanna, and they're so powerful when the teachers are, you know, and not only are they doing that for themselves as a team so that they're all on the same page, but ultimately it's what's best for kids. You know, if you give them the target, they're going to go to that target. You set the bar and they're going to get to that bar. So giving them that opportunity to know, we're going to be assessing you on this target. I can, whatever it happens to be. And yeah, knowing in advance of what the target is that I have to hit. We want to know that, right? So absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
One other thing too, she just mentioned, you know, the kids knowing that is making sure that you're posting those learning targets for them, that they understand, you know, what it is you're about to do. If you do a pretest in the beginning, you can give that pretest, but after that pretest, you know, go through this is what we're going to be learning. It helps students kind of be able to take a hold of their learning more and understand what they're doing when they can see those and they know exactly what their end goal is. They're just not like, oh, am I supposed to do this, supposed to do that? If they have those targets, you've went over them. You might even go over the rubric form that you use in your data binder, and let the kids see. Like, don't keep them in the dark. They need to be a part of the learning process as well, and make sure that they're understanding all parts of it as well. So that needs to become common language in your classroom, are the different learning styles. Now, don't expect them the standard. You don't necessarily have to go over, because we know how confusing that can be to us. But definitely think about, you know, make sure you're sharing those learning targets with those students and that they are understanding what they mean.
Dusty, I just want to build off one thing you said is the pretest. And I know that for me, a pretest was a real big hang up that I had to talk a lot about with solution tree consultants, because I felt like, honestly, I felt like they were a waste because the kids don't know it. They don't know that material. And then I discovered, well, for solution tree, a pretest isn't really what they know about the material. It's going to be to stimulate interest. And if you have stimulated interest, if you have approached your pretest and you have stimulated the interest in learning, then you have been successful giving your pretest. And so that was a really big sticking point for me, because I felt like it was a waste of my time. And I'm being honest. And now I see the light. This year when I gave the pretest, I never said a word to the students about, you know, except this is just a pretest, just to see what's going on in your mind. And it's not for a grade or anything like that. And oftentimes after the pretest, they'd be like, okay, so we're getting ready to learn this, right? Because now I want to know what's going on. This is interesting. And so I felt like I had finally been successful with a pretest.
Thank you for sharing that, Rosanna, because I hear that a lot too, or the pretests are a waste of my time. I could be using this for something better. And then do I have time to grade it? No. But talking through that with the students, and again, you're stimulating that desire to want to learn the material. And as you come back in your units and you're teaching it, they're capturing it. Oh wait, I remember seeing this on that assessment. I'm gonna know it this round. And yeah, it does. It's amazing what things do for our children. All right, well, that was a great conversation around assessment, and don't feel like we have to stop that conversation. You can put your stuff in the chat as we go along, and as you're thinking through things. We are going to jump into RTI. I said my learning targets and essentials were my favorites. This is kind of up there with that as well. I love the RTI process and what it does for our students. So I am going to jump right in here and talk RTI for you guys. And then I'll share some stories about our building and how we handle RTI. Just again, what works in our building may not work in your building, but if it lays a foundation for ideas, then that's making progress. So RTI. So RTI, remember there were 4 questions. Question 1, what do we want our students to know and be able to do? Question 2, how are we going to know if they know it? That's that assessment piece. Well, 3 and 4, what are we going to do with these kids? The question 3 with the students that haven't learned it yet, that key word of yet, because they're going to, right? Because it's essential, it's promised, it's a power standard. And then what do we do with the students who already have learned it? Because they deserve to continue to move forward too. And sometimes we forget question 4 and how powerful that can be for our students and our school as a whole. So question 3 and 4 are dealt with within that RTI process. So taking action is another fantastic resource for RTI. Our district, and probably some of you all too, I recall there were some Fort Smith schools who came up, and we had Mike, and I believe Brian Butler was there, and they worked through a whole 3 days of RTI process. And we had this huge, actually it's right here, this huge pyramid that we talked through all of these pieces of the RTI process because it is so in depth. I'm going to give you the bird's eye view of RTI, but don't forget, you can reach out to us and we can have a whole discussion around just RTI or just assessments, whichever piece it is that your school or your team is needing. So interventions are most effective when they target a student's specific learning needs. Okay, thinking back to what we have talked about all day today, essential standards with the learning targets, this is where it's coming from. They have to be specific. They can't be that overarching standard that is hard to process because it's in educationese, right? It requires data that can identify the specific standard, learning target, skill, or behavior. We recently went through the RTI behavior side of things too, and it's a game changer when you're talking about intervening for behavior as well. I'm going to talk more academics, but just know that we can use that same pyramid and that same process, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 for behavior also. So RTI, it's not a specific program. Like you can't go to the store and buy RTI, right? It's not even a type of teaching. It's an approach to, first of all, measuring their skills by those assessments, using that data, and then deciding what type of targeted teaching are we going to use. There's so many instructional strategies. There's so many resources out there. And we know that we have 24 different children in our classroom or 28 different children in our classroom every single year. And what I have to offer them isn't going to meet the needs of every single student every single time. So it's very important that we take a look at what's working for the majority and then what's not working, because I'm going to have to figure out something to really target those students that aren't getting it. So the underlying premise is that we're not waiting. We're not waiting to fail, right? Marari was talking about that earlier, that you're not waiting until the end of the unit. You are doing checks in between to make sure that they're getting there, that eventually they're going to be where we need them to be. And that we're not waiting for them to fall far enough behind that they finally qualify for special education to provide them the help that they need. No, that's too little too late. Yes, there are students who have a learning disability and they deserve to be recognized. They deserve to get the help that they need, but there is an over-identification of special education students. And we have found that in our district, a lot of our special education students are move-ins to us. They're very mobile. And so sometimes we'll get those students in and they've been identified in another district as special education students. And, you know, we work with them, we include them. We are very much a push in to the gen ed population when it comes to special education students. But we got to meet their needs. We've got to meet their needs regardless. And then schools should provide targeted and systematic interventions to all students as they demonstrate the need. All means all. This isn't, oh, well, you're a special education student, so you'll get yours from your resource teacher or you'll get yours from your co-teaching teacher. No, it is all. It is mutual accountability. We are all responsible for all 460 students in our building every single day of every single year. So it is very much that it becomes who we are. We are taking care of every student in our building. RTI is not the road to special education. A lot of times in the past, it has been, that's exactly what it was, right? Like we've done these 4 or 5 interventions. They are not working for this kid. I think he or she needs to be tested for special education. Yes, it helps to support that. If that's what we're seeing eventually that a student is needing, it does help support that. But it is not, we're going to intervene and after a couple of times of interventions, we're just going to throw our hands up and say, test this kid. All right, the right questions that we should be asking about our own schools. Schools cannot succeed by doing the right things for the wrong reasons. So what are the right questions that lead to this work or lead our work? What is the fundamental purpose of our school? Okay, think about that question. What is our fundamental purpose in education? What knowledge and skills will our children need to be successful adults? Yes, we're 4th grade teachers. We're leading them up to be successful adults. So what is it at 4th grade that I need to be certain that they have to know, be able to do? How are we going to know if they know it? And then how are we going to take care of it if they don't know it? And then what must we do to make learning a reality for all students? So 3 pretty powerful questions that I would encourage you to be asking your administration, you to be asking your own team. What must we do to make this happen? Because it's our moral obligation, right? As educators, it's our moral obligation to provide the very best education and move all students forward. So this is that RTI at work pyramid. Notice that it is upside down, right? When we went through school, most of us probably, it was the other way around. This makes more sense to me, and it is how Solution Tree pushes forward on that RTI pyramid, because ultimately tier 1 is everyone, right? That is all students receiving the same, no matter if you are labeled, if you have a learning disability, if you're ELL, all students receive that tier 1 grade level instruction. Now, will they all be successful at that? No, we know that that's not going to happen for all students. Although it should happen for a large majority of your students, it's not going to happen for 100% of your students most of the time. So that's where we're looking at those next levels. So then this tier 2 you see is smaller, because there's just some students that will need to be in a tier 2 intervention. And then you look at tier 3, and that's even smaller. That should be smaller, because this should just be a very small percentage of students in your building or at your grade level. So you can see that we have, the pyramid helps you to kind of visualize where those students are going to be. We have teacher teams leading and taking responsibility, grade level, and then inside that grade level with tier 2. And then here, it's just certain access for students. These are more of those universal foundational skills on that tier 3 level. So here's what the tiered instruction looks like. So for tier 1, the school starts by ensuring that every student has access to that rigorous grade level curriculum, guaranteed and viable curriculum that we've talked about all morning long. You have to have your essentials identified. You have to have the learning targets identified. You have to have those assessments, just as Mareri was saying, we have to have those assessments done before we start teaching, because we need to be crystal clear on what it is that we expect our students to know and be able to do. Differentiation for individual student needs cannot be optional at tier 1. So whether in an elementary math lesson, a secondary social studies, teachers must scaffold that content, the processes, the product on the basis of student needs. So even at tier 1, we are still providing that scaffold for students to work towards. Dusty, did you have something to jump in?
No.
Okay. All right. So at tier 2, the school uses ongoing formative assessments. See where this is all coming into play now. It's all a part of the whole entire process. So formative assessments to identify students in need of additional support and specific learning needs. These are on your grade level standards. Okay, so the tier 2. Most Tier 2 interventions are delivered through those small group instructions using strategies that directly target a specific skill deficit. Again, you're using the information from your common formative assessment data to make decisions on how to intervene when a student hasn't learned it yet. Intervention is most effective when they are timely. Murray hit it hard. She said, you know, you can't have it where it's days and weeks moving on, because you've got to be able to provide that instant feedback. Those interventions need to be timely. They've got to be right when the students are needing them the most. Focused on the cause of a student's struggle rather than their letter grade. Okay? Be very careful about that. Well, they made it 50%. Okay, that's great. That's not great, but we know that information. However, why? What's the cause of that grade? What is it that they did not understand? Was it one specific learning target? Was it a skill that needed to be taught a little differently? Maybe I need to send this student to that teacher's classroom because more of her students got it than my students. So making sure that we are looking at that data and making decisions.
I do have.
Yeah, go ahead, Dusty. Let me.
Adding on to that, what she was saying about, you know, maybe that student needs to go to a different room or whatever. That's another piece of that collaboration and why it's so important that it happens right after you give those assessments, or that you are meeting and going over that. If you're seeing across the board, none of these students got it, that's an issue with your Tier 1 teaching. And you guys as a team need to figure out, okay, how can we go back and reteach so that they can? If a vast majority of your students are missing the same common misconception or something off of the learning target, that's where you've got to go back and look at that Tier 1 again as well, and see, you know, do we need to do something there? And again, and I know it happens in our school, you know, we have different teachers. We have some that are really good about really bringing up those kids, and we have some that are really good about really extending those kids. You know, we all have our specialties of what we're good in, and those conversations have to happen because we know that everybody has all types of those students. So that's another point where before you even get to these Tier 2, make sure your Tier 1 is exactly what it needs to be. Or did we do something wrong in Tier 1 instead of trying to pull a group of students to do a Tier 2? Is it worth that, or is it going to be more successful if we go back and we look at our Tier 1 instruction as well?
Excellent point. Excellent point. And that Tier 1 is that guaranteed and viable curriculum. And you get that guaranteed and viable curriculum by your essential standards, your learning targets, and your assessments being so spot on. But they're not always perfect, right? They're not perfect. And you're going to have those times where you step back as a team and you look at the data and you're like, geez, like, wait a second, what did we screw up on here? But the beauty of that is you have that trust built, you have the team, you have the knowledge of everybody on board with you because you are a professional learning community. So the trust is there. And sometimes you do just have to step back and go, well, valid effort. Let's figure out as a team what would work better. This is also very valuable to administrators because if that team is struggling to get that Tier 1 where it needs to be, then we can look at that as a, wait a second, do I need to provide them more resources, different resources, some PD, something, you know, better for their understanding to teach that strategy to students. So it's not just useful just at that grade level. It can be useful as a school too, that maybe we're struggling in a particular area. And that's on me as an administrator to say, whoa, wait a second, I need to probably offer something else to my team here. So jumping back into that Tier 2 piece, I really appreciate this part of it, and this goes for Tier 3 as well, that it's administered by a trained professional. Sometimes we get schools that will use their paraprofessionals with those students who have the higher needs, which is fine if their paraprofessionals are trained in that specific area. For example, we have a few of our Title I paraprofessionals who are trained in our Phonics First program, in Haggerty. You know, they are a trained professional in that particular area. the highest trained professionals should be in front of the highest need students. And sometimes that's a little bit flip-flopped. So really be thinking about who's in front of those students who are needing a different strategy or a different method, making sure that they're that highly trained person sitting in front of that student. A part of a system that guarantees these practices apply no matter which teacher a student is assigned to. We've got to make sure that it doesn't matter, just as Dusty was talking about. I can think of my 4th grade team. I have a very vast knowledge on that team. And there are team members who thrive on helping those struggling students and team members who thrive on extending those students. We need both. We need both to make great things happen. And so no matter what teacher is in front of them, the student is going to be successful. The beauty of it is we can share those students out. Well, when it's not a COVID year, right? Like that threw us for a whole nother loop last year, but we're past that, right? Like we have figured out things to make that happen, but don't be afraid to share those students out. The data will show if you are ready to take on a different group of students, and that's beautiful. All right, tier 3. So the schools start by guaranteeing that all students in need of intensive support would receive this help in addition to core instruction not in place of it. I was guilty of this years ago when I was in the classroom too. It's reading block time, and I have 4th grade students who are reading on a 1st grade level. I better send those reading students to here while I teach mine. It's reading time, so you pull these kids for reading over here. Well, what's happening there? The gap is continuing to grow because those students are not receiving grade level instruction and then additionally receiving instruction or interventions on those foundational skills that they are needing. But how do I schedule that? How does this happen? You get real creative real fast because you know it's what's best for kids. And so trying to figure out when, if I've got my core instruction and I have taught that, then maybe that student stays for my core instruction and all the big stuff. And then a person can come and they can help to facilitate that foundational piece. Is it important that we offer that to students? 100% it is. They need to be in there at the very minimum, hearing and soaking in that grade level material and then giving that foundational boost that they are needing. And that's a tricky one and kind of controversial when people are first starting this process. But if our goal is to ensure that all students learn at high levels, then replacing core instruction with remedial assistance not only fails to achieve this outcome, but also tracks at-risk students into below grade level curriculum. They will not get where they need to be if we continue to replace core instruction with remedial assistance. And that is why we have moved more drastically to the co-teaching model in special education, because we need those students in. And yes, those students deserve and they need that assistance, they need that help, but they can receive that help from a highly qualified person inside that classroom and keeping them in and hearing and being a part of that grade level instruction. Intensive help must be individualized based on a problem-solving approach. It's unlikely that a single program will meet the needs of a student in tier 3. And this is problem-solving approach. This is a team, okay? When you've got a student who is in need of foundational skills, especially let's think at a 4th grade level, because that's who we are, right? 4th grade level, and you've got students who are reading on a 1st or a 2nd grade level. We all do. So that needs some problem solving. That needs to come to a team where we can think through and we can look at the data, we can look at trend data, historical data on this one individual student. We call ours the SOS team. It's called Save Our Students is what it is. And that team is made up of grade level teachers, special education teachers, our counselor, our reading interventionists. And when we bring that data and we bring these issues, if you will, learning struggles to this team. The goal is, let's problem solve to figure out what we can do for this student. One example that happened this year that hadn't happened in the past, we had a couple, actually I think there were 3 boys who were really struggling with written expression. Well, we had gotten to the point where we were, of course, allowing them the opportunity to type that piece out too. But we kept finding the more and more that we did that, they were still lacking the motor skills, the fine motor skills to be able to put those together. Guess who came to the rescue on that? Our librarian. Our librarian did a 20-minute intervention at the end of every day with these 3 boys, and the process, or the progress that these boys made as they went into the remaining of the school year was fantastic. Not only did it help with what they were doing handwriting wise, but it also helped because there's one more person in this building who cared, who checked in on them, who, you know, made sure, are you making progress here? Who checked in with their teacher. Those little things make a huge difference for the children. So making sure that we're involving everyone on our teams to help move our students forward. Schools need to deliver Tier 3 interventions with greater intensity than Tier 2 interventions. They can do this by increasing both the duration, how long it is, and how often, the frequency of the intervention, and lowering the student-teacher ratio. So I told you I was going to tell you just a little bit about how we do hours in our school. We call it win time, which is becoming very commonplace the more that I read the model applications. Win time, what I need, and it is very, very individualized. So this past year, of course, COVID year threw us off because we weren't able to share children the way that we always had been. But the teachers cannot wait to get back to win time being offered. So what we do is 8:05 to 8:35 every day, Monday through Thursday. We basically shut our building down. There are no grade levels. All 42 staff members are involved. And this is where we take our data. We do our baseline assessments at the beginning of every school year. So we do STAR, we do reading inventories, math inventories, all kinds of baseline assessments for our students. So when between the start of school and Labor Day, we analyze that data, we put all the students on a spreadsheet, and we start looking for those students who are struggling the most. So those that need the most intense interventions possible. So our dyslexia interventionist, our Title I. So we're using those people to really provide that foundational need that needs to be met first. And then we start looking for holes for the other students. So it's a lot, right? Like all of these collaborative pieces are coming into play. By the time we are finished, it's after Labor Day, and we start our win time building wide. And all students go everywhere. If a student doesn't have a high need, they may get more of a Tier 2 type of intervention during that time as well. Or if there are none and those students are excelling and you know they're holding their own, they go to an extension. And so that's our music and our art and our computers. So that's where our RTI, the big chunk of it comes, is in that Monday through Thursday daily intervention piece or extension piece for question number 4. So just ponder that. Again, what works in our building may not work in your building, but it certainly might just spark a little thought process in there. All right. Did you have something? Okay, go ahead. Oh, let me mute myself.
So one thing to remember too is, you know, the creative thinking, the outside the box thinking, and it's a story that I love to tell. And obviously it wasn't last year because it was COVID, but the year before that, I was doing a math intervention group for some 5th graders. They were really struggling with the multiplication and needing kind of that broken back down and that. And we had got together on one of our whole building meetings We sometimes would start our collaboration time as a whole building and do some check-ins to our wing groups and how things were going. And a discussion came up about third grade saying, you know what, I need some extensions for these kids, but they don't necessarily like want to go to music, or they don't want to go to here, or they were full, you know, we didn't really have anywhere to put them. And so the discussion came about how these kids, I said, you know what, how about they come to me? And they're like, but you're an intervention. And I'm like, I'm an intervention for the kids who need it, but why can't I also be an extension for those kids who need to go farther? And so, you know, those third grade kids, so I had third, fourth, and fifth, you know, I had fourth grade that was still needing that help. I had third graders who, you know, they were doing super in multiplication. They came in, and I had third through fifth graders like working together in pairs and helping each other's out. And, you know, a few weeks went by of this, and we were kind of doing a check-in, and the third grade teacher said to me, they're like, I don't know what you're doing in that group, but it's awesome, because these kids went back to their classroom. And then as they started to have, you know, they might be doing number talk discussion, they might be doing different things, you know, in math that had to do with multiplication. They were bringing in ideas that had never been brought in before. And it really sparked some great conversation and really kind of pulled some more learning out of those kids as well. So don't think you are specific, that you are an interventionist or you're an extension person. Like, those groups can be fluid. You can make the kids move. You can give them what they need based on what they need. Okay. And you have a variety of grade levels, so you can easily extend for your lower grade levels that come up to that. You can easily intervene for those that come back down. And you know, the age difference was not a problem at all in the classroom. Like, the kids, they thought it was great to get to work with somebody else and to bring different knowledge to the classroom as well. So be open-minded. It's a lot to take on, I know, but you really do have to think outside the box. You really do have to keep an open mind. And you know what? You try it, it doesn't work. Well, that's how it is. You try something else. But if you try it and it does work, great, you've got something to go on now. So keep that in mind.
Dusty, I just want to tag on to that my school also did vertical, we did vertical intervention enrichment, and I had fourth graders who would go to sixth grade teachers to learn new skills. And we experienced the same thing you were talking about, just really sparked interesting, rich conversations back in the classroom where other students then wanted to get to that point. And it served as a really great motivator. And for those who needed intervention, it really filled the gap.
Absolutely. And I know one of the concerns when we first started this several years ago, my fifth grade team, they expressed concerns that the fifth grade students would be embarrassed to go to third grade. They didn't want to go back down to that hallway. So we painted our hallways. We painted our third grade blue, we painted our fourth grade green, and we painted our fifth grade orange. And we refer to them as colored hallways, not the third grade hallway, the fourth grade hallway, the fifth grade hallway. And that took care of it. And there actually wasn't one issue with a student who expressed concern about going to an intervention, because once they're in that intervention, they're with the same. And so it helps that they can be successful in the same situation with the other students, where in a general education setting, they don't always get to experience that success. And so it was very exciting to watch it happen. And it was exciting for me as a building leader this year to hear the teachers saying, I can't wait to get back to win time. I think it just solidified how we do business and how important it is to us as well. So I have showing an RTI flow chart for academics. We also have an RTI flow chart for behavior that I didn't put in today. And I know that you're probably not able to read all of that. So I'm just going to step through each of these pieces just to kind of help bring the RTI process together. So let's say that the student demonstrates an academic concern. We want to always include the parent, that there is a concern. The more proactive we can be about that, the less reactive they're going to be towards us. So the teacher is collaborating with the grade level, maybe the content areas, and anything that we can do for that tier 2 strategy piece. Okay, so we've gone here, and let's say that the tiered interventions are successful, and we get a smiley face. Okay, we've taken care of that student. We're ready to move on. Now, if the problem persists after we've done some grade level interventions, small groups within the classroom, or maybe shared over to another grade level teacher, then we're looking for some more ideas. So this may include involving the SOS team to have some conversations, even if it's not at a tier 3. Maybe we've just done this cycle several times and we're still not seeing that that student is grasping this concept. So maybe we need some different people in front of them. Maybe it is like Dusty was saying, maybe that student needs to go to a 3rd grade classroom during WIN time, or that 5th grade student may need to also go to a 3rd grade instead of their grade level. So we continue doing this. However, we get to a point where we have exhausted that. You know, we're like, something more intense is happening. So we'll move right on over to this side. The student is performing significantly below grade level, identified as qualifying for tier 2 and or tier 3 interventions. Still not making progress. Classroom teacher definitely will take that to the SOS, schedule a meeting. Again, the parents are notified and the parents are invited to those SOS meetings. We had several parents come to those this year in particular because we were able to get those notifications out to them in a quick turnaround. So that is huge when a parent can come and be a part of it and feel the desire from your team that we're trying to move your student forward. I had to get a little bit testy with one of our parents this year in a very kind way, but also in a very, we really do care and we really do want the best for your children. And ultimately, those children were able to qualify for special education. And it was a celebration, to be honest, because we had seen the need for so many years. We had so much historical data on these children. But I wanted to share with you, involving those parents in those meetings just on their student is hugely powerful. A plan of action, follow-up meeting, a copy, of all of their paperwork. We've got to keep track of all of that. Plan implementation, interventions, your progress monitoring, ongoing data analysis. So we're going to follow up regardless. If it's successful, fantastic, but we're going to follow up. So there's always that piece of we're holding each other accountable to make sure that we are going through this process for this student. Lack of progress, plan some new interventions. Continued lack of process, then we get into that case study for the possible special education. Or showing progress, the goal's not quite met, we're going to continue that intervention plan. So when we come back together and we have that follow-up meeting and we're saying, okay, they're making gains, they're making baby steps. Okay, the goal's not met yet, so let's continue that intervention. And hopefully and successfully and celebratory, the goal is met. We continue those interventions and we keep coming back around to make sure that that student is still being successful. So that sounds like huge, right? That sounds not doable, but I promise you it is. And what you'll see over time is those numbers are going to go down because we are hitting them with guaranteed viable curriculum at a tier 1, or we're intervening quickly at a tier 2. The tier 3 students are those ones missing the foundations and have some gaps. And those are the ones that we have to hit hard and fast without taking them out of that tier 1 core grade level status, right? Like all of the grade level curriculum and all of the grade level material still has to be taught to those students, even those that are struggling in the foundations. So why are we going to implement RTI? And I love this one from Buffum and Maddows. The answer lies in why we joined the profession in the first place. Why are we here? We are here to help our children. We are here to educate kids. Our work must be driven by the knowledge that our collaborative efforts will help determine the success or failure of our students. It is our collaborative effort that makes great things happen for them. RTI should not be a program. It can't be a program. It's not out there. You don't just buy RTI to raise student test scores, but rather a process to realize students' hopes and dreams. We have to continue to offer hope. It should not be a way to meet state mandates, but a means to serve humanity. Once we understand the urgency of our work and embrace this noble cause as our fundamental purpose, how could we possibly allow any student to fail? I love this piece because it does go into our moral obligation as educators. We can't provide the tier 1 instruction, put our hands together, say, sorry I taught it, sorry you didn't get it, and move on. We owe it to them with our essential standards. These are the things I promise you're going to learn, and I'm not going to give up until you learn it. And I'm not going to let you off the hook. I'm going to hold you accountable because this is what I am saying and what our team and what our school is saying. You will learn before you leave us. And once the students catch on to that, it's kind of powerful. They know that, well, she's going to make us do it. I better get busy and better get to learning it. All right, so I'm going to stop there and ask if you have any questions. That was a very, very quick overview of RTI. The entire book of Taking Action is RTI. And so think about how thick that book is and how quickly we went over RTI and the process. So anyone, you can jump in on the chat, you can unmute yourself if you have any questions there. We are going to jump into resources next. And then Marari, your resources, is that correct? All right, I'm going to let you jump in and we'll be watching the chat to see if there's any questions there.
I do have a quick question. We had just started this past year we had the block of time designated, a 40-minute block of time school-wide, and we utilized all hands on deck, all of our teachers. But my question is, for the students that are struggling in both math and literacy, did you prioritize and mostly focus on the literacy, the reading skills? Or did you do like 2 days of this and, 2 days of literacy, 2 days of math? I mean, how did you go about focusing on that?
So we had that a lot. And I know I mentioned it before that I'm, was primarily taught the math until last year. And then, COVID and everybody did everything. But, and I used to say that all the time. I used to say, hey, but the student really needs this math help, like you keep taking them and reading's always the first priority. And you know what? I kind of had to step back a minute and say, okay, reading is the most important thing, because if they can't read, they can't do math. And so we really do have to focus. We, again, had to get creative. If it was, you had to look at, I guess, the severity of it. If it was just a reading one and maybe they weren't extremely severe, okay, could that teacher then maybe do some extra intervention in their small groups, in their tier 2, in their classroom? And then, yes, we could put them in the math group. Or, you know what, maybe the math wasn't as severe. They needed some, again, could it go back to that classroom teacher? Could they do some small groups and help with that skill? So it really is going to vary upon you and your teachers. It's going to vary almost case by case. Yeah. You really do have to look at where, what is the child struggling with? If they're not even getting their phonic sounds and, not being able to do everything, well, that's a severity that you need to focus on that. So you almost really just have to kind of pinpoint where's their severe at this. And then, we also did some too, where maybe the whole first semester they were in reading and they got their reading and we really hit them and worked on them. And then we switched them to math. Or, we would kind of go back and forth just depending on where they were. So I'm sorry, I don't really have a straight answer to that because there really isn't. I mean, you just really do have to look at it case by case. and just see what's best. That is a, you know, if we could do 2 RTI times and we could focus on the math and we could focus on that, then great. But there's no set in stone answer to that. You're just going to have to figure out what is best for that child at that time. And, you know, maybe set a goal. If a child hits this goal, then, okay, we're going to give them a little bit of extra math, and then maybe we're going to go back to reading. I mean, that's a good thing. And I talked about the fluidity, you know, the fluid part of the RTI process as well, that, you know, it should be constantly changing. You should not meet beginning of the year. We look at our baseline data, we set our groups, and okay, there you are for the year. You need to be checking in. You need to have that data. You need to be progress monitoring throughout those groups to make sure that you are being successful with that student and that you are giving them what is best for them. So I hope that answered your question somewhat. If there's something else particular you have, I'll be happy to answer that as well.
Very much individualized, case by case, just as Dusty was saying, and it does become every teacher with every student. And the conversations, once those interventions and extensions start happening, you know, by the time we get into October, the names are just starting to filter through the building. We have a spreadsheet that we keep in our Google Drive, and we only allow a few people access to be able to switch students around. Our goal is to move kids. So it is very fluid. And when they have shown that they know what it is that they're supposed to know, we get them out of that group as quickly as possible. And we let our students know that too. You can earn your way out of this as soon as we have these skills. And I'll tell you, those 5th grade students, man, they want to move. You know, they're constantly wanting to have something different to look forward to. So again, it's being transparent with the students as well, that here's the skill that you're missing. We're going to target that, and I will give you the opportunity to test out, and we'll get you moved into a different room, a different intervention, or even moved up to an extension. So it is very much a case-by-case individualized piece.
Y'all don't necessarily have
Sorry,
like,
Tanya, go ahead.
no, you do not say, okay, 2 days a week, we're going to focus on literacy skills, and 2 days a week, we're going to focus on math, like all teachers. I really like the idea that you said, I meant that as a question, and then I went right into the next thing. But I do like what you said, Dusty, about maybe the whole first semester that everybody focuses on literacy. That's pretty much how we tried to do it this past year. Of course, with COVID, we weren't able to group the kids and move them, but that is what we plan to do this coming year. So I think that is, but then you run into a lot of your teachers not being confident with being able to teach literacy skills if they're like in our 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, if they're content specific teachers. So anyway, we're still struggling with that process a lot.
Tanya, we did too at my school, because we do have content specific teachers. And what we did was during our collaboration time, the literacy teachers, the really stronger literacy teachers, we really met with the math teachers, and we prepared lessons together, and we discussed it together so that they were really very clear on the end goal and the steps to get to that goal. I know that sounds like a lot of work, but we all need to have that, have those skills as teachers anyway, because we're always going to come across students who need those gaps filled. So it really made sense to do that. I know that y'all were talking about doing the whole first quarter as literacy. So I just wanted to toss in that we do 5 or 6 weeks as literacy, and then we do 5 or 6 weeks math. So we do it pretty much with our progress reports. That's kind of how we do it. And that works for us. So you can just change it up, whatever you find works for you.
And it wasn't necessarily, maybe I need to make that a little bit clearer. I didn't mean that everybody was doing literacy, everybody's doing, I meant like those individual students, maybe that were your more severe cases. We tend to have a lot more literacy interventions than we do math, because that's where the priority does sit in the beginning. Hopefully, if you're hitting that literacy and you're hitting it hard, as your years, 1 or 2 years down the road, you're closing those gaps and you are able to focus on your math a little bit more in that. So we still at all times have, just a small select group of people doing math. Like I said, the majority is on literacy, but there is some still math going on as well. I meant more kind of like switch that student back and forth, or, get that student to make some goals with that and then switch them. And then another comment that I had from earlier when Mandy was talking about those 5th grade students that want to get out, going back to last year, when we were doing our wins, we got phone calls from parents. My kid can do this. Why is my kid in this group? I don't understand. Well, when we pulled up their test scores and did that and saw it, it's like, oh, that's why. Yes, that kid was very capable of doing it, but that kid didn't try on his assessment or that. So it really motivated some of those higher level kids that, they wanted to do the drums in music. They wanted to do the ukuleles, they wanted to create masterpieces in art and learn how to sew and do some things, but they couldn't because they weren't truly showing us what they could do. And so it did become a motivator for those higher level learning of kids that wanted more of that extension, that were put in groups of they didn't really need. And, we don't want them taking up a spot of somebody who might really need that when they don't really need it, just because they don't want to have, as Rosanna said, the will to do it. So it definitely can become a motivator as well.
Excellent conversations, guys. Anybody else want to share how you might be doing RTI or questions around our RTI? All right, I'm going to turn it over then to Miss Mareri, and she is going to talk about resources. Guys, there's so many resources, and we've hit that today. There's so many great things out there, but we're going to hit on a few of them. And then I think we get into some questions and conversations. Is that correct?
I believe so.
All right. Okay, Miss Mareri, sorry.
Okay, so on here you will see that we have a couple different of the books that we have been quoting throughout the whole presentation. So the first one is Learning by Doing, and this is like the PLC Bible. If you do not have it, I highly suggest that you find a way to get your hands on it. If you have the presentation PDF, I do believe that I have this one and the Taking Action book linked in to Amazon. So you should be able to click on it and it'll take you to where you can just add it to your cart and check out. The Taking Action is the book that Mandy had referenced for RTI, and it has really good information. That is another one that you should pick up. On the next page, you have a link to the Arkansas Department of Education, the playbook. And we developed this last summer with, the state teacher teams. And we basically looked at what standards we got to, which standards we felt were the most important for that grade level, and made 2 units, I believe, for each subject, ELA and math. And so if you click on it, that will, I think the way that it's set up, you can go in and you can see for reading, writing, math. And so those are all linked in there. And the idea was that if we were in 4th grade and we wanted to identify if our kids, what kind of gaps they had, we could look at the 3rd grade to see what they should know. And so 5th grade would be looking at 4th grade to see what they needed to go back and fill in. So that is available to you there to just kind of see. It would also be good for any sort of like RTI. If you want some resources for tier 2, You could even go in there and look and see the grade above, the grade below, for intervention and for extension. So that is all put together there with resources and whatnot. The other document that is linked is a SMART goal template. I think this is the one that Rosanna had talked about. Yes, for SMART goals. And so that is there for you in case you and your team need it. And then we have the two other books, the Shifting from Me to We, and the big book of tools. And we got it, I think it was this year, and there is a lot in there, like a lot. And so sometimes we would be in our team time and we would say, like, we have this really good idea. We could, make some sort of document that looks like this. And then we would go, oh, wait, let's go see if it's already been done. That'll save us some time instead of trying to figure out how to make it. Why reinvent the wheel? And so I would suggest buying that book and checking if what you need is already in there. That way it saves you some time. But all of these resources are super great. Like Rosanna had mentioned, we are not sponsored, but these have been very beneficial for us, and we would like to share that knowledge with you. And I believe those are the two slides that we had for resources.
All right, I'm going to stop screen sharing now, and we are into a Q&A session. So it looks like we are closing in on the 2 o'clock hour, which is perfect because we didn't do the afternoon break since we had more of an extended lunch time. So this will, we will be formally finished at the 2 o'clock time, but we definitely want to give you the opportunity for some Q&A after all of these bigger pieces that have taken place this afternoon. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and we can come back in and just feel free, guys. This is your team. This is us just having conversations. We want this to be about you, your school, your needs, anything that we can provide to you. So let's chat. If you've got something you want answered or concerns, anything, just jump right in. Or not. That's fine. I'm